meetings and 3 stops today. There's just never enough time. If you've ever considered flying private jets, you have to check out One Flight's badge. The badge makes searching and booking private jets as simple as booking a hotel. Just type in your location and find the closest airport. Then choose from over 4,000 jets in one place. When I land, there's always a car waiting for me, courtesy of One Flight. What's your time worth? Badge it.
Closing the books on 2020 payrolls. Did the holidays boost hiring? Where could new COVID strains and vaccines continue to impact the workforce? December employment numbers tomorrow. Watch Squawk Box anytime on demand.
This is my first time trying on glasses at home. So cute!
5 different frames from Warby Parker.
Oh, this one's better.
Ooh. Ah. Hey.
The virtual try-on is perfect. Like, they look like they're on my face. Like, look at this. Just swipe and switch.
These are definitely a keeper.
I think these are the one. Ooh, these look good.
That was so easy. They make it so fun and fabulous.
We're excited to do business with you, but before we sign, I gotta ask.
Sure, anything.
We searched you online, and maybe you can explain this?
Can't believe that garbage is still coming in. That is so false.
Frustrated with your online search results? Call Reputation Defender today to join tens of thousands who've improved their online reputation. Get your free reputation report card at reputationdefender.com or call 1-877-866-8555.
All right, Chamath, we don't have that much time left. Let's talk rocket ships. First, Bitcoin. That falls into that category because that's what that is. 39,000. Where's it going?
I mean, can you play the clip in 2012 and 13 when it was at 200 and everybody was laughing at me on CNBC every time I would talk about Bitcoin? Where is it going? It's probably going to 100, then 150, then 200,000. In what period? I don't know. 5 years, 10 years, but it's going there. And the reason is because every time you see all of this stuff happening, it just reminds you that, wow, our leaders are not as trustworthy and reliable as they used to be. And so just in case, we really do need to have some kind of, insurance we can keep under our pillow that gives us some access to an uncorrelated hedge. And it's going to eventually transition to something much more important. But for right now, you're just getting all these data points that prove this thing. It's just the fabric of society is frayed. And until we figure out how to make it better, it's time to just have a little schmuck insurance on the side, and everybody's running in. It's just an incredible thing. I could never have imagined it.
Good to be a schmuck, I guess, if you got in early and it goes to where you think it's going to go. The other rocket I want to talk to you about, and I know people are interested in this, Virgin Galactic. The company, maybe it was your first SPAC deal. I think it was. You sold a fair amount of that, 38% or so, 40% around there. Why?
No, it was less than that. I sold a portion, 3.8 million shares of just the PIPE. So it's much less than that as a percentage of my overall holdings. And it was literally just to make sure that I had the right liquidity to do all the things that I planned to do in 2021. But I really believe in that business. It's an incredible team. It's an incredible product. I think the way that they're thinking about it, our CEO, Michael Colglazier, is just so impressive. One of the top executives from Disney that we were able to lure over. The team he's building is amazing. I'm really, really excited about that business, and I'm just really proud to be around him.
I ask you because some people took that sale as maybe a lack of belief in where things were ultimately going to go. I'm sure you understand that.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, if and when, I think it's probably more when than if, I have 10 times the capital that I do now, I'll be able to manage my liquidity in a different way. But, at the end of the day, I'm trying to move a lot of balls forward. I'm making multiple billions of dollars of investments this year into climate change. I'm going to try something really disruptive in student loans. And all of that takes money. And so, I just have to be able to manage everything in my infrastructure to make sure that I can do all of these things. And that's what it was.
You tell us about your next big thing when you're ready. It's good having you as always. You be well. Happy New Year. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Scott. Happy New Year.
All right. Thank you. Chamath Palihapitiya joining us there. Final trades quickly. Jenny?
National Retail Property, 5.5% yield should do well in the coming environment.
TRB?
Uber about to make a new 52-week and all-time high.
Yeah, you've been big optimistic on that. Steve Weiss.
Jumia, Bailey Gifford, one of the largest shareholders of Tesla, now has a 10% interest in the company.
Man, another big day for JMIA, up better than 12%. It's a big day again for stocks, by the way. The Dow and the S&P once again hitting new record highs. Dow right now is good for 250 points. Thanks so much for watching. It does it for us. The exchange is now.
Thank you, Scott. Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Evans, and welcome to The Exchange. A chaotic and historic 24 hours in Washington. The Senate and House did ultimately confirm Joe Biden's election as president after being disrupted for hours by riots. The White House issuing a statement on behalf of the president vowing an orderly transition. But Democratic Senate Leader Schumer among those calling for the president's removal today. We are expecting to hear from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi soon. That's been pushed back to about half past the hour. As for markets' reaction to all this, well, how about more record highs? We'll talk in a moment about some of the strong economic data that's been coming in lately and other factors that are pushing stocks up. But let's begin in Washington, where Kayla Tausche brings us the very latest this hour. Hi, Kayla.
Hi, Kelly. Well, the calls from Democrats, at least, to invoke the 25th Amendment, which would force the departure of President Trump immediately, those calls are growing. But within the administration, two senior Trump administration officials, one current, one former, both tell me that last night there were closely held conversations among cabinet staff as to whether to invoke the 25th Amendment, but that so far there's been no formalized movement within the cabinet to proceed. And also doubts about whether there would in fact be 8 cabinet secretaries to support this effort, as would be needed to put it into effect. Earlier today, we got the first cabinet-level comment addressing this issue from the Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue. He was speaking to reporters on the ground in Georgia, where he's been this week. And when he was asked about whether he's had contact with his colleagues about this issue, he said no, but it was a good question.
It's a good question. The 25th Amendment, I have not. I've had no contact with other cabinet members in that area, nor do I expect to have any. I know some people have issued their resignations, which again is their prerogative.
The resignations do continue at the highest level departures from the Trump administration since yesterday, just coming today. You have the Deputy National Security Advisor, Matt Pottinger, who is leaving. That was announced by his boss, the National Security Advisor. He, along with the U.S. Trade Representative, led China policy. You also have the Washington Post and the New York Times reporting that the White House's chief economist, Tyler Goodspeed, is also leaving. Add to that multiple mid-level staffers from the press office, and there is quite a high number of individuals who have chosen to leave the White House, even though their departure was impending just a couple of weeks from now. As for what happens on the legal front, Kelly, the D.C. police chief, the chief of the Metropolitan Police, said that there were 68 people arrested in conjunction with the events at the Capitol yesterday. And federal law enforcement officials say that we should expect criminal charges to come as soon as today, although one official tells me that it is still possible that President Trump, if he would like, could choose to pardon those individuals. Kelly?
A lot of focus on invoking that 25th Amendment, Caleb, but also we're hearing, was it Schumer who said, if not that, then impeachment?
Schumer and also some Republicans on the Hill, Kelly. Adam Kinzinger, who's a Republican in the House of Representatives, earlier today suggested the possibility of removing the president. And you also had Senator Mitt Romney talking about the possibility of impeachment. But the general feeling, Kelly, even among Republicans who have had a change of heart since the last time the president's impeachment was considered, have acknowledged that there's a pretty long procedure that would need to take place. And with just less than 2 weeks before President Trump is set to leave office anyway, that there are serious doubts about whether that process could actually be completed in that time. And they just don't feel like it's an effective use of time for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Very, like you said, got barely 2 weeks to go, and it certainly felt as if it needed a lot longer than that in the past. But still, we'll be hearing more about this, we expect, from perhaps Pelosi. We'll see if the president-elect himself addresses it. We could get a lot of commentary this hour. Kayla, thanks for now. Our Kayla Tausche in Washington. We mentioned that markets are shrugging off any concerns about chaos in Washington and jumping to new highs again today. Let's get right over to Dom Chu, who's following the action for us. Dom, what do you see?
So, Kelly, you and Kayla were just talking about the the feelings and what's happening right now sentiment-wise in Washington, D.C., well, that feeling is not translating into the markets. As you can see here, green across the board with records in many parts of the market right now. Specifically, I want to call your attention to the NASDAQ Composite, which traded above that 13,000 mark for the first time ever. So the NASDAQ, a huge focus there on a very record day for stocks overall. One big part of that stock story surge over the last several days, and certainly today, has been the financial sector. Interest rates are on the rise, especially the long-term ones, and the difference between long-term and short-term rates is the highest since the summer of 2017. That helps a lot of banks. And by the way, take a look at these two ETFs, the XLF and the KBE. Both of them track the banking or financial sectors. You can see here, we are near some of the highest levels of the year, the past 12 months, and a lot of that surge has come in just the last week or two. And then check this out. Tesla shares hit a record high today. Elon Musk is the richest man in the world, but we used to talk about bubbles and say Bitcoin. Well, would it be surprising to show you right now that Tesla, you can see there, is now far and away a much bigger performance gainer over the course of the past year than Bitcoin. In fact, since the lows, Kelly, I will tell you, Tesla shares pre-pandemic, since the pandemic lows in March, is up over 1,000% versus the over 800% modest gain in Bitcoin prices, just to give you an idea of how crazy some of these values have gotten. And by the way, Tesla before March, $70 billion market cap, it's $770 billion today.
I'm looking at that little Bitcoin corner there, Dom. We're less than $200 away from it crossing $40,000 for the first time. Is just remarkable. Holy cow. Dom, we'll check back in with you shortly. Thank you, sir. Dom Chu. The transition of power in Washington is one factor that's been pushing markets and rates higher this week. There are rising expectations of $2,000 stimulus checks coming under a Democratic Congress, which Leader Schumer says will be a top priority. And this on top of already strong economic data from ISM manufacturing to services to booming consumer imports. Here to discuss the merits of more aid and the wild events of this week, I'm joined by Austan Goolsbee. He's professor at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. And Jason Furman is a professor of practice at the Harvard Kennedy School. Both have served as chairs of the Council of Economic Advisors under President Obama. Welcome to you both. And Jason, I wanted to jump in with you at first on maybe some reservations that yourself, the likes of Larry Summers, have had about the wisdom of $2,000 stimulus checks. But before we get into all of that, do you want to just react? I think Tyler Goodspeed just stepped down from his seat at the CEA.
Yeah, I think Tyler Goodspeed did the good thing, right thing in resigning. And I think anyone who is not preserving the safety and security of our country could send a message by resigning at this point.
Okay. Austan, we'll give you a chance to kind of comment. Yeah. Well, okay, Jason, go ahead.
Oh, I was then going to answer your economic question, but which is that I think that the most important development for the economy this week was that the Democrats took the Senate. With that, you're going to get more upfront relief. You're going to get more longer-term rebuilding. That's going to be positive for economic growth. And so it's no surprise that markets are focusing on that development and positive development in the economy this week.
But let me ask you, Jason, if you think that's the right move. I mean, what about what Larry Summers has said that, you know, $2,000 stimulus checks would really push household income dramatically higher next year? We already have checking accounts, even for the lower 25th income percentile, higher than they were a year ago. We have excess consumer savings of maybe $1.6 trillion that are going right now. I mean, you just heard from Chamath Palihapitiya last hour some of the same figures about what's going on with the consumer. So is this the right move?
I mean, my prioritization would be aid to state and local governments, more money for vaccines and testing, extending unemployment insurance, making sure we continue to have demand in 2022, 2023. I think all of those things are more important than the checks. I don't see a huge downside to the checks in terms of overheating. You'll just see a lot of the money get saved and the spending spread out over a longer period of time.
Austin, one thing that has been interesting, if we go back, kind of wind the clock back to Tuesday, and even the fact that Democrats appear to have pulled out victories with those Senate seats in Georgia, is that you can kind of circle it back to the president himself. So yes, you know, the most drama was yesterday on the Capitol, but this has been something that actually has probably empowered the Democratic Party to be able to accomplish a lot more of their agenda than was thought, certainly after the initial results of the vote back in November.
That's kind of the delicious irony of this whole thing, is that the more President Trump has raged and shown himself to look almost deranged, as he's done that, it has both emboldened the votes to give the Democrats the control of the Senate, and it has clearly put on the agenda what was the Democrats and President-elect Joe Biden's platform of the campaign, which was stop the virus, restore the economy. And the President Trump's approach was, no, everything's fine. We just pretend like it's going to go away by magic. So I do think you're 100% right that the agenda is now absolutely getting driven by the president-elect. But in a way, that's how it should be. I think the reason that the market has not processed in a negative way the events of yesterday, as crazy as they were, is that they're fundamentally like, in 13 days, Trump is going to be out of there. Politics can go back to being boring. We're going to reestablish some trajectory of getting control of the virus and going back to what we were doing before this whole mess began.
And ironically, Austin, politics might get boring, but the markets are starting to act a little bit more interesting, and I'm not sure if it's in a good way. You know, yes, it's encouraging to see the 10-year yield back above 1%, inflation expectations above 2%, but these things are starting to spike a little bit. The Fed's already now kind of talking about whether it's going to have to start tapering. You know, you see what's going on with crypto prices. Everyone's watching the dollar a little bit nervously, and I guess that's what I mean. It's sort of, you could say politically, this current president has emboldened the Democratic Party, but is that platform one that they're going to be able to pursue, or do you think they're going to meet resistance in doing too much?
Well, I mean, if you're implying that there's a danger of runaway inflation, I guess I totally disagree. I think that argument that we better really watch out for the impact of inflation is one that the Democrats' critics have been saying since 2009, and we haven't seen that inflation. If we got inflation over 2%, that would be the first time that we actually hit the Fed's inflation target in, what, 15 years? I mean, let's dance a jig if we can get the inflation back to the inflation target.
Sure, but it's not me, Jason, that's talking about tapering. It's Bostic. It's Raphael Bostic from the Atlanta Fed. You know, the Fed members themselves, we learned in the minutes yesterday, are already talking about, you know, taking the playbook from 2013. That was the taper tantrum. That saw the 10-year go from like 1.8 to over 3%. So they're cognizant already of the fact, look, the ISM manufacturing report for December was over 60. New orders were over 67. That was before the COVID package that just passed, not to mention what else might be coming down the pike. So it's not so much a question of runaway inflation as of the appropriateness of the next piece of what could now be, some analysts think, another $1 trillion stimulus package.
Look, if we have an economic response that relies more on fiscal policy and less on monetary policy, that would be a good thing. You know, I remember when people were worried about all these asset purchases, worried that the Fed was distorting markets, worried that rates were too low for too long. All of that is what happens when you don't do enough on fiscal policy. If you do enough on fiscal policy and it turns out the Fed doesn't need to buy as many assets, great. That means you've done a good thing in rebalancing the macroeconomic response in a way that's both good for the macroeconomy, but reduces some of the financial stability risks. I think they're small, but some of the risks you have associated with over-reliance on monetary policy.
That's true. That's been their objective, and this may be the way of getting it one way or the other. Jason Furman, Austin Goolsbee, thank you guys both. Appreciate it today.
Thank you.
Coming up, It's politics and your portfolio. We're going to look at what the new administration with the Democratic Congress could do regarding different sectors of the economy. Plus, some bold moves from the social media companies over the past 24 hours. Facebook now banning the president from all of its platforms until he leaves office. Look at the implications there. Twitter shares, by the way, of down 2% after also making similar moves. And Bitcoin, oh my goodness, just crossed over $40,000 for the first time. We were speaking with Dom Chu not 10 minutes ago when it was at 39,800, and now we're already at 40,158. The surge is just remarkable to watch. Bitcoin has doubled in just the past month. We'll keep a close eye on it. We're back right after this.
This is The Exchange on CNBC.
Enterprise Artificial Intelligence has the power to transform the most complex organizations and the world, delivering medical supplies where they're needed, keeping our armed forces at the ready, cleaner, safer energy, all thanks to 1 billion predictions per day. C3.ai is AI at a global scale, harnessing the power of data to build a better future. C3.ai. This is Enterprise AI.
Mr. Wonderful here. It's hard for everyday people to get access to startup investments. But with Start Engine, you can choose between hundreds of startups to build your portfolio. It's your turn to become a shark. Visit startengine.com today.
Wildly fresh. Organic, fresh produce. Chef prepared. Now you can skip the grocery store and stay healthy at home. Sunbasket delivers totally delicious meals ready in minutes. Fresh and ready meals. New from Sunbasket. Use code TV35 to get $35 off plus 4 free gifts.
Having trouble getting help for erectile dysfunction? Get help fast with Lemonade Health. Just answer a few questions. And they can send you medication so you can get better quickly. Visit lemonadehealth.com today.
It was time someone made a better wallet, so we did. This is the Ridge. Precisely engineered to fit all your cards and cash in a fraction of the space. And made from military-grade materials so we can guarantee it for life. Get 10% off today at ridge.com/TV.
Welcome back, everybody. Soon, all 3 chambers of government will be controlled by one party. Now the Democrats have taken both Georgia Senate seats. That could lead to policy changes across the economy. And here to discuss that, plus what investors should keep an eye on in the wake of yesterday's riots in D.C., let's welcome in Brian Gardner. He's the chief Washington policy strategist at Stifel. And Wardrick McNeil is managing director at Longview Global and a CNBC contributor. Welcome, Brian. I'll start with you. And can you just give us a sense for, as we wait to hear from Pelosi and Biden this hour, possibly Lindsey Graham, as Kayla alluded to earlier, there's only 2 weeks left to go with this president, but what should investors be watching in terms of possible outcomes here between now and then?
Obviously, there's a lot of scuttlebutt and speculation about whether Congress or administration officials will step in and remove the president in the waning days of the administration. There's a lot of judgment calls that have to be made here, especially by administration officials. Does any move to remove the president make the situation worse, or does he represent such a threat to national security and to the peace and stability of the country that he's unfit to lead and has to be removed? That's not, as you and I can sit here, but when you're a principal sitting in that seat, it's much more difficult. You have to take into consideration the possible follow-up riots that could be worse. And with 2 weeks, is it worth that price and that risk? On the Hill, I'm skeptical. As you noted in your last segment, there's not a lot, and Kelly noted, there's not a lot of time left. Congress needs a little bit more time to act. It's one thing to have members of the opposition party weighing in. You really need senior Republicans to step in if this is going to be serious, because it has to go that quickly, and you can't do it quickly if Congress has any division whatsoever. It really has to be a fully unified congressional action.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying maybe don't expect any significant developments either way, although Dworczyk, it's not clear that markets would care. Do you think does that make sense to you, that we've kind of just looked past this as we look towards the reaction where markets are much more focused on some of the stronger signs coming from the economy, maybe fiscal stimulus coming down the pike again now?
I think, Kelly, most of the market is looking forward to a Biden administration. And as you pointed out, when you control the House, the Senate, and the White House, it means less gridlock in Washington, more predictability. We know now that who Biden nominates will likely be who he gets in his cabinet. And that level of predictability businesses like. I think they also are looking at the fact that we are going to see some form of stimulus, some greater coordination between the federal and the state and local governments, and perhaps some state and local government aid to deal with the pandemic. And I think that's all good news. There is an alternative side to this, though, which is, yes, please.
Go ahead. No, I want to hear the alternative.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to pay for this, right, Kelly? And so will there be some sort of a corporate tax rate adjustment to pay for all of this? I think when you look at that, so there's some pros and some cons, but I think the market is taking this in a very balanced way.
So is gridlock good or bad? You know, it was one thing when it was, you know, hey, we've got basically a purple Washington and nothing's going to happen. And now it's, well, we've got a blue Washington and stuff's going to happen, but we don't care.
Well, I think it depends on what you're trying to see done. I think a lot of people would like to see something done on infrastructure. Those things have gotten gummed up when you have bills that sit in the Senate and can't get a hearing on the floor. Now, again, it doesn't mean this stuff is going to pass. It just means we will get a chance to see them come to the floor. They'll be debated, and if they pass, they'll be signed by the president. So I think, you know, infrastructure, the green economy, I think those things are things that are going to move in a Biden administration that have been somewhat stuck over the last 4 years.
Fair enough. And obviously, we've seen huge moves in some of these sectors like materials yesterday, some of those infrastructure plays. But Brian, we've also heard that, you know, for the last 4 years and not much really changed. I'm curious what you think in terms, we mentioned this, but kind of going through the different sectors of the economy, we've seen financials up big and interest rate prospects looking better. Obviously, some niche areas like solar and cannabis jumping. What do you think investors should realistically be looking for opportunities in?
I think opportunities and risk, both risk and opportunities, investors should be looking to the regulatory world, less the legislative world. I do believe that there is gridlock because it goes beyond just the Senate flipping, but it's only flipping 50-50. The House is closely divided. Getting things through Congress is going to be enormously difficult. And so more of the action is going to be at the regulatory level. So I think there's some risks in the tech world and healthcare because of increased antitrust scrutiny. I don't think there's a sea change coming in banking regulation, although for larger bank M&A deals, we may see things slow down a little bit and as applications get more strict or closer scrutiny. So I think there's some regulatory risk, the energy sector too. I think kind of old energy, dirty energy is going to come under a closer microscope. So there's regulatory risk. I'm not as convinced on this reflation trade because somehow Congress is all of a sudden going to be able to pass a reflationary type of spending agenda.
Interesting that you don't think that's as big of a prospect as maybe some others on Wall Street are starting to expect. Brian Gardner, Dworczyk, McNeil, thank you both, guys.
Thank you, Kelly.
We appreciate it talking us through the Washington agenda now. Coming up, world leaders reacting to yesterday's events on Capitol Hill. We'll look at the foreign fallout with former China ambassador and Governor Gary Locke. And as we head to break, take a look at the semiconductor names which are surging today amid this broader rally. NVIDIA, by the way, NVIDIA not a bad Bitcoin play either with the exposure there. Bitcoin's above 40,000. NVIDIA's up nearly 5%. AMD, Applied Materials, Lam, they're all up nicely as well. The exchange is back in a moment.
Sometimes you want speedy, but reliable. State-of-the-art, but dependable. In other words, you want a hybrid. So do telcos. That's why they're going hybrid with IBM. A hybrid cloud approach with Watson AI helps them roll out new innovations anywhere without losing speed. From telco to transportation, businesses are going with a smarter hybrid cloud, using the tools, platform, and expertise of IBM.
Good work, little buddy.
There are many names for enthusiasts, but there's only one way to become one, by going all in. The new Lexus IS, with a lower center of gravity, a more responsive suspension, and an aggressive, wider stance. This is what we call going all in on the sports sedan.
Lease the 2021 IS 300 for $359 a month for 39 months.
Experience amazing at your Lexus dealer.
Mr. Wonderful here. It's hard for everyday people to get access to startup investments. But with Start Engine, you can choose between hundreds of startups to build your portfolio. It's your turn to become a shark. Visit startengine.com today.
New projects means new project managers. You need to hire.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. The moment you sponsor a job on Indeed, you get a short list of quality candidates from a resume database. Claim your $75 credit when you post your first job at Indeed.com/home.
This is my phone. It's also my new bank, GoToBank, the ultimate app that makes banking super easy. There are no monthly fees with direct deposit, and I get 10 times the national average on my savings. It's mobile banking at its best. Open an account at GoToBank.com.
Welcome back. Chaos? What chaos? The Dow, the S&P, the NASDAQ, the Russell, they're all hitting record highs today. The NASDAQ is having its best day in almost 2 years. It's up 2.3%. The Dow up 364 at the highs. We're just up about 200 points at the moment. All this as the 10-year yield continues to climb as well, touching around 1.08% today, just below a hair below that level right now. It only crossed back above 1% 2 days ago for the first time since last March. Take a look at the sectors, and it's pretty broad-based in terms of the rally today. Utilities and staples are lagging, but not by much. For more on all these moves, let's bring in Michael Santoli. And Mike, what's the message from the markets here?
Well, I grant that it's kind of incongruous to see these unsettling scenes on television, never been witnessed before, and yet see the market not really reprice itself in response to that, although it was off its highs in the afternoon yesterday. I think it's a lesson in what the market is built to do and what it evaluates, what it pays attention to. It's very willing to set aside things that don't feed into the direct economic, interest rate, liquidity, trade flows, all those things that it's attempting to discount at every moment. Also, I think it's worth in this specific case to talk about how nothing about the policy premises that investors had going into yesterday was really challenged by those events. If anything, over the course of it, as you heard people come out and respond to it, including Republican senators and Congress people, they were actually condemning the activity. In other words, it seemed more likely than not beforehand that the Electoral College vote was going to be accepted as ever. So therefore, it was uneasy to watch, perhaps. But the market, I think you should start with the question, what should the market have been repricing during those events yesterday? What specifically? And it's hard to come up with it.
And on that note, you know, there are other things that have been pushing us around as well. In other words, we've got the economic data that's been really pretty strong, especially for December. ISM manufacturing, ISM services, you know, new orders up. The trade deficit numbers today, I mean, that's actually a headwind for GDP, but it's because of strong consumer imports. So it feels like they're looking there. We're seeing inflation expectations rise. We're seeing the Fed now kind of talking a little bit about tapering bond purchases, and I mean, those are that would all be a pretty big deal in a normal week.
Right. So the bull case on the economy, the idea that we are set for an economic acceleration, perhaps even with some more fiscal support or activism down the road, it's all about us. So you're getting this reinforcement of that idea. That doesn't mean the market can't get ahead of itself on all these things. It doesn't mean that the market has it perfect. And there's a tremendous, as we keep talking about, speculative energy in this market that's essentially oblivious to anything real going on in the moment. It's all about tomorrow and expectations and some fast money. So all those things put together, it does leave it in a state of a bull market, perhaps in the process of building toward some extremes based on good fundamentals and a Federal Reserve that is just kind of letting the kids play as opposed to, you know, calling penalties right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's harder to call penalties. It's easier to let them play, but then it comes back to haunt you. Anyway, Mike, thank you. Okay. Mike Santoli back at HQ. Let's get over to Sue Herrera now for our CNBC News update. Hi, Sue.
Hello, Kelly. Hello, everybody. Here's what's happening at this hour. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is calling for President Trump's immediate removal from office. And soon we will hear what President-elect Biden and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi have to say about the Capitol riot. Biden is scheduled to introduce his Justice Department team, and Pelosi will be holding her weekly news conference. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said today President Trump was, quote, completely wrong to cast doubt on the election.
I unreservedly condemn encouraging people to behave in the disgraceful way that they did in the Capitol. And all I can say is I'm very pleased that the president-elect has now been duly confirmed in office, and that democracy has prevailed.
And Czechoslovakia's prime minister has changed his longtime social media profile photo from a red hat modeled after Trump's MAGA cap to a photo of him wearing a COVID mask with the Czech flag. Andrej Babis is among the world's leaders condemning yesterday's Capitol invasion by a pro-Trump mob. You are up to date, Kelly. I'll send it back to you.
Sue, thank you very, very much. Sue Herrera. Still ahead, Facebook and Instagram blocking President Trump for at least the next 2 weeks until the transfer of power is complete. Those details, the potential fallout, and the precedent it sets coming up. But first, former Commerce Secretary and former ambassador to China, Gary Locke, weighs in on what yesterday's events could mean for our relationship with China and our global standing. We're back in a couple.
I sent your new prescription to the pharmacy. Any idea how much it will cost? I recommend GoodRx. You get free coupons to save on your prescriptions.
GoodRx. Smart.
Stop paying too much for your prescriptions. Thanks. Download the free app today.
Guys, is this your new normal?
My problem is right in the middle.
It's all right here. Lose the weight with Nutrisystem for Men. Lose up to 13 pounds in your first month. Lose weight now. Money back guarantee.
I got to eat all of my favorite foods.
Make Nutrisystem for Men your new normal.
That's all I did. I ate the food, I lost the weight.
Act now and save 50% off a month of food and shakes.
Go online or call 877-959-FIT8 to save 50% on a month of food and shakes.
Satan?
2020.
Please, call me 2020.
I just don't want this year to end.
Who would?
Mr. Wonderful here. It's hard for everyday people to get access to startup investments. But with Start Engine, you can choose between hundreds of startups to build your portfolio. It's your turn to become a shark. Visit startengine.com today.
Hey,
I'm Nick. We created Gabby because most people overpay for car insurance. Gabby is a free tool that saves you money by finding the best deal. Gabby saves users over $800 a year on average. Go to Gabby.com and stop overpaying for car insurance.
Hitting your New Year's resolution is easy when everything is done for you. Meet Freshly, chef-cooked meals ready in minutes. Skip the cooking and cleaning and get meals delivered fresh to your door. To order your meals, go to Freshly.com.
I finally found a reason to love staying at home. Each month, Literati sends me 5 amazing stories. And every box comes with tons of other fun stuff. Also, it's age appropriate, whatever that means. So go to Literati.com and sign me up.
It was so stupid. What was that? You were just...
Super Wild Card Weekend is here with 2 primetime showdowns on NBC. Bucks, Washington.
To the end zone, touchdown.
Browns, Steelers.
That was awesome.
This weekend on NBC and streaming on Peacock.
Welcome back with yet more breaking news out of Washington. Let's get right to Kayla Tausche. What's happening, Kayla?
Well, Kelly, we've learned from 2 sources familiar with the matter that Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao is resigning from the Trump administration. We have confirmed this reporting, which was first reported by the Washington Post, which cited a draft email that she is expected to send to Department of Transportation colleagues, where she cites yesterday's events at the Capitol as her reason for doing so. Important to note, she is the spouse of Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, who has issued a concurrent statement where he does not mention Chao's status with the administration, but he does rue the events of yesterday. He says he salutes and applauds the frontline Capitol Police officer and says the ultimate blame for the actions yesterday are the unhinged criminals who broke down doors, trampled our nation's flag, and fought with law enforcement. So he is not mentioning President Trump by name. He is not mentioning his wife's resignation from the administration. But we have learned from 2 sources familiar with the matter that Chao is stepping down from her post running the Department of Transportation. And we will see whether we get more cabinet level resignations to come after this. This is the first. Kelly?
Kayla, it's leading people to speculate, do they leave because they wanted to pursue the 25th Amendment and others didn't, or just, in disgust and that sort of wasn't a factor either way? Who knows at this point?
Well, that's something that we're going to have to report out at this point. I mean, the information that I have about her departure is still very early. That being said, when I was in contact with senior administration officials about some of these nascent conversations around the 25th Amendment, she was one individual whose name was brought up as someone who might be interested in pursuing this path simply because of her position as a longtime member of the Republican establishment. She was the labor secretary under George W. Bush. Her husband, of course, has served in the Capitol for many decades and was present there at yesterday's events. So she is someone who not only has been serving through multiple administrations, but who also, for whom also the events of yesterday hit home quite literally.
Yep. Kayla, thank you. Kayla Tausche with the latest there. The storming of the U.S. Capitol is the lead story around the world. With our allies expressing shock at the scenes, China is mocking the U.S. government and contrasting it to the protests in Hong Kong. Will yesterday's events hurt U.S. diplomacy, especially in our negotiations with China? Joining me now is Gary Locke, interim president of Bellevue College. He was the former Commerce Secretary and ambassador to China under President Obama and governor of Washington. So I'll call you governor if that's all right. Welcome. And China does seem to relish this moment. Is it going to have a longer lasting impact, do you think?
I think this deplorable, shocking scene is going to have huge ramifications for the United States in terms of our image abroad and our influence, not just in Asia and with China, but with so many countries around the world. For so long, we have always been preaching to other countries to uphold the rule of law, to allow governments to transfer power after an election, to make sure that the military doesn't step in and overthrow governments because they didn't like the election. And yet now we have all these other countries around the world that you've already reported on expressing concern about what has happened in America,
urging Americans to observe the rule of law and to respect the peaceful transfer of power and abide by the elections. They're now preaching to us. So China is laughing at us and saying we're not the model of democracy and of civility and of stability that we have always been lecturing the rest of the world to embrace. And quite frankly, it empowers China and elevates its influence, especially as it's trying to provide economic aid, assistance, military aid, and even foreign policy initiatives to the rest of the world. And that's what is most distressing in terms of the ramifications of what we saw yesterday.
You know, that said, this president is leaving in 2 weeks, Governor, and the rest of the world is clearly looking towards what a Biden-led U.S. is going to look like. And perhaps the biggest challenge for the next president is whether he is going to be ultimately appeasing, I would call them rivals like China, by sort of doing what the rest of the world would prefer in terms of, you know, coming to a consensus and our dealings, maybe softening the tone a little bit and all of that kind of thing. Or if that ends up being a more powerful way of negotiating, kind of tilting the power balance back towards the West. It's going to be a difficult balance for him to strike, don't you think?
Well, certainly American government and American businesses and American workers have long had grievances about the trade and economic policies of China. They are not following their promises when they joined the WTO. They're not following international rules. And so these concerns that America has are very, very legitimate. But the Trump policy or approach strategy has backfired. It has not it has not caused China to change any of their policies that we're very upset about, whether it's rule of law, theft of intellectual property, unfair trade policies, and unfair government subsidies toward their businesses. At the same time, American consumers, because of the tariffs on all Chinese goods coming into the United States, has cost the American household on average, according to the New York Fed and even Wall Street Journal and many other publications, $800 to $1,000 more per family per year. At the same time, our allies, who are now supplying these products to China, and those European products are not facing tariffs imposed by China. So the goods from European countries and our allies are actually cheaper compared to the American goods, which means that our competitors, our allies, are actually reaping the benefits of this trade war. And yet they have the same concerns about China's economic and trade policies. So I think under a Biden administration, you're going to see focus on these grievances that American companies and the government have long had, worldwide concerns. But we're going to do it in concert, in collaboration with our allies so that we're a united front, so that we're not suffering while our allies and the companies of our allies actually benefit.
No, we were reminded again this morning just how much the trade balance is deteriorating. Governor Locke, thank you. We'll leave it there for now. Appreciate your time today. Former governor and ambassador to China. Still ahead, Elevation Partners Roger McNamee had strong words for the likes of Facebook and Twitter on Squawk Alley this morning, but he also said there's another tech giant responsible for sowing discord.
YouTube literally does not engage in the controversies. They're just as big a contributor. I mean, maybe not quite as big as Facebook because you can't organize an insurrection on YouTube. But in terms of spreading disinformation and hate, YouTube is horrible. I find it astonishing that they've been able to dodge responsibility this long.
Facebook and Instagram have blocked President Trump now from posting for the rest of his term. Will others follow suit? We will discuss that when the exchange continues. Stay with us.
Baby, just to let me down.
Let me down. And mess me around.
And then worst of all,
If you ride, you get it. Geico Motorcycle. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
Digital transformation has failed to take off because it hasn't removed the endless mundane work we all hate. automation can solve that by taking on repetitive tasks for us. Unleash your potential. UiPath. Reboot work.
Mr. Wonderful here. It's hard for everyday people to get access to startup investments. But with Start Engine, you can choose between hundreds of startups to build your portfolio. It's your turn to become a shark. Visit startengine.com today.
Meet Tonal, the smartest home gym that learns as you get stronger, with personalized expert coaching and revolutionary digital weight, so you can be your strongest. Visit tonal.com.
This is Monogram. We're an Austin, Texas-based medical technology company transforming the orthopedic market by combining state-of-the-art surgical robotics with patient-optimized implant design. Monogram is the future of orthopedics. Visit thebonebot.com.
Welcome back to The Exchange. Facebook taking unprecedented action today, blocking President Trump's Facebook and Instagram accounts for the remainder of his term. In a statement, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg saying, quote, "We have allowed President Trump to use our platform consistent with our own rules, at times removing content or labeling his posts when they violate our policies. We did this because we believe that the public has a right to the broadest possible access to political speech, even controversial speech." But Zuckerberg said the current context is now fundamentally different, involving use of our platform to incite violent insurrection against a democratically elected government. Now, will these moves engender more controversy, and what kind of precedent do they set? For more, let's bring in Chris Kelly. He's Facebook's first chief privacy officer and its former global head of policy and general counsel. And CNBC's own Julia Borson is with us as well. Chris, I'll start with you. What do you make of, I mean, what is your knee-jerk reaction to banning a sitting president for a couple of weeks?
It's an extraordinary action.
And the reasons that they cited for it.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary action, but these are extraordinary times. I mean, I don't think we've ever faced a situation where, you know, the president of the United States is effectively advocating armed insurrection against, you know, the Congress that's certifying the electoral vote that beat him. And so it's extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. And so this is actually a measured response to the situation that's been created by the president.
So that said, do we have to worry about the precedent here, or do you think it's such a unique situation that it's basically this is all as it relates to this president and this particular moment, and that's kind of going to be the last of it?
This is a pretty, I mean, just the most extreme circumstance that you could ever imagine. And the action that's been taken is, I think, measured to that. I do think that precedentially that it should be a principle going forward still that maybe there's a closer watch on the likelihood of whether something would move into an armed insurrection. And obviously the harm policies that Facebook has articulated both publicly and that it holds privately in terms of the way that the policy enforcement works here are looking at that. And I think they will continue to look at that. You know, the process of thinking that a president would ever stoop to the level that President Trump has been hard for most Americans to wrap their minds around, you know, let alone the Facebook policy apparatus.
Julia, let's talk about YouTube for a moment. We just heard Roger McNamee saying that they should be considering similar moves and that they're as responsible as other platforms here. YouTube has already kind of talked about a little bit about this, saying, you know, starting today, any channels posting new videos with false claims in violation of our policies will now receive a strike and so forth. Are they going to be under more pressure?
I do think all of these companies are going to be under more pressure, Kelly. And to the point of your last question, I think what's really important here is these are companies. They can set their own rules. They are not public utilities, though sometimes they may be regulated as such. They can set their own rules. And what's important is that they show that they enforce those rules consistently. What they're showing here with this move, or what Facebook is showing here with this move today, is that President Trump is so much in violation of its rules that they believe this is a necessary step in order to secure the safety of the platform. So what I think we're going to see going forward is perhaps more pressure on these companies to make sure they're enforcing the rules fully. It's very hard in whack-a-mole situations to pull down content instantaneously. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook have all, instituted various, algorithmic things and artificial intelligence to be able to instantly identify offensive content. But at the end of the day, Kelly, it is very hard to enforce that. And I think they're just going to be under more pressure to do so. And I think YouTube will come under more scrutiny. And Kelly, it's because it's not just about the organization of things like the riot we saw yesterday, but also the spread of information that can incite that kind of behavior.
The language from Senator Warner, Chris, is pretty strong here. He says, I've continually said these platforms have served as core organizing infrastructure for violent far-right groups and militia movements, helping them recruit, organize, coordinate, and in many cases, and he says with respect to YouTube, generate profits from their violent extremist content. So what's the next step there for those who would say that they do play a role? Some might say they're unfairly being blamed for everything that occurred, but if they did and do actively play a role in these issues?
A lot of this is about enforcement at the end of the day, that in many cases the sites have the right policies and have articulated them over time, and striking the balance between allowing for pretty extensive political speech and wide, robust, open debate, and the move to violent insurrection can sometimes, unfortunately, be quite a thin line. American constitutional law and American First Amendment law has tried to draw those lines very carefully over time, and I know that Facebook has been inspired by that. When it moves directly into action, though, the enforcement actually becomes somewhat easier. Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and Google have been trying to develop more and more technology to address this harmful content early on, and I think that they will continue to invest extraordinarily heavily in all of these things. I know that Facebook continues to be very focused on that, and say that look, the rules are clear, and we have to focus on enforcement situations, and this was one where such an extraordinary action was taken even after the armed insurrection in the Capitol. You had the president essentially defending the people who are taking action, and that means that the danger for the remaining 14 days of his term was too great to allow him to use the platform.
Julia, all of that said, shares of Facebook are up a couple percentage points today, so they're shrugging it off. But Twitter is a different story. They are down slightly. Some analysts are saying, removing someone like the president from their platform could be more damaging because it's such a strong source of engagement. So is there a business risk here for these companies that, the very point of their existence is undermined? Not to mention, of course, the kind of earnings potential issues, their profit margin pressures that all of them face if they have to continue ramping up enforcement and monitoring.
Well, Kelly, I would just say that these companies have taken different tacks. Twitter said that if President Trump removed or deleted 3 tweets that broke its rules, that after 12 hours, he would be able to then start tweeting again. His account is blocked for 12 hours. That would indicate that President Trump, after his account deleted 3 tweets at roughly 3 a.m. this morning, sometime this afternoon would have the ability to tweet again. The question, of course, is whether Twitter will then decide to follow in Facebook's footsteps and decide to extend the block on President Trump's account. So I think that it's just worth pointing out here that these companies are taking very different approaches as of this moment, and we'll see what other limitations Twitter decides to put on that account. YouTube is a different situation because people can share videos and reshare videos, but what we're talking about is really the direct voice of the president through Twitter. Also, Kelly, remember that, President Trump has 88 million followers on
Chris,
Twitter.
Apologies to jump in here, but the president-elect himself is now speaking, and we want to go right to that and hear his remarks. Again, President-elect Joe Biden.
Judiciary, as well as we're talking about the Attorney General's office. And so I'll have plenty of time to ask the questions I know you desperately want to ask about everything from the 25th Amendment on, but I'm not going to speak to that today. I want this to be the issue that we focus on because I think it's so important. Yesterday, in my view, one of the darkest days in the history of our nation. An unprecedented assault on our democracy. An assault literally on the citadel of liberty in the United States Capitol itself. An assault on the rule of law. An assault on the most sacred of American undertakings, ratifying the will of the people in choosing the leadership of their government. All of us here grieve the loss of life, grieve the desecration of the people's house. But what we witnessed yesterday was not dissent, it was not disorder, it was not protest, it was chaos. They weren't protesters. Don't dare call them protesters. They were a riotous mob, insurrectionists, domestic terrorists. It's that basic, it's that simple. And I wish we could say we couldn't see it coming. But that isn't true. We could see it coming. The past 4 years, we've had a president who's made his contempt for our democracy, our Constitution, the rule of law clear in everything he has done. He unleashed an all-out assault on our institutions of our democracy from the outset. And yesterday was but the culmination of that unrelenting attack. He's attacked the free press, who dared to question his power, repeatedly calling the free press the enemy of the people. Language at the time he first used it, I and others said, has long been used by autocrats and dictators all over the world to hold on to power, the enemy of the people. Language that is being used now by autocrats and dictators across the world, only this time with the imperator of an outgoing president of the United States of America. He's attacked our intelligence services, who dared tell the American people the truth about the effort of a foreign power to elect him 4 years ago, choosing instead to believe the word of Vladimir Putin over the word of those who've sworn their allegiance to this nation, many of whom had risked their lives in the service of this nation. He deployed the United States military, tear gassing peaceful protesters in pursuit of a photo opportunity in the service of his reelection, even holding the Bible upside down. The action that led to an apology from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and an outspoken denunciation of the use of military for domestic political purposes from scores of former military leaders and secretaries of defense, led by Secretary Cheney. He thought he could stack the courts with friendly judges who would support him no matter what. They were Trump judges, his judges. He went so far as to say he needed 9 justices on the Supreme Court because he thought the election would end up in the Supreme Court and they would hand him the election. He was stunned, truly stunned, when the judges he appointed didn't do his bidding, instead acted with integrity, following the Constitution, upholding the rule of law, not just once or twice or 3 times, but over 60 times. Let me say it, over 60 times. In more than 60 cases, in state after state after state. And then at the Supreme Court, as judges, including people considered, quote, his judges, Trump judges, use his words, looked at the allegations that Trump was making and determined they were without any merit. Nothing was judged to put this election in question or doubt by any of these judges. You want to understand the importance of democratic institutions in this country? Take a look at the judiciary in this nation. Take a look at the pressure it was just subjected to by a sitting president of the United States of America. At every level, the judiciary rose to the moment during this election, did its job, acted with complete fairness and impartiality, with complete honor and integrity. When history looks back in this moment that we've just passed through, I believe it will say our democracy survived in no small part because of the men and women who represent an independent judiciary in this nation. We owe them a deep, deep debt of gratitude. And then there's the attack on the Department of Justice, treating the Attorney General as his personal lawyer and the department as his personal law firm. Through it all, we would hear the same thing from this president. My generals, my judges, my Attorney General. And then yesterday, a culmination of an attack on our institutions of democracy. This time, the Congress itself, inciting a mob to attack the Capitol, to threaten elected representatives of the people of this nation, and even the Vice President, to stop the Congress from ratifying the will of the American people in a just completed free and fair election. Trying to use a mob to silence the voices of nearly 160 million Americans who summoned the courage in the face of a pandemic that threatened their health and their lives to cast that sacred ballot. I made it clear from the moment I entered this race that what I believe was at stake. I said there was nothing less at stake than who we are as a nation, what we stand for, what we believe, what we will be. At the center of that belief is one of the oldest principles this nation has long held. We are a government of laws, not of men, not of the people, of laws. I said it many times in the campaign. Our democratic institutions are not relics of another age. They're what sets this nation apart. They're the guardrails of our democracy. And there's no president. That's why there is no president who is a king. No Congress that's a House of Lords. A judiciary doesn't serve the will of the president or exist to protect him or her. We have three co-equal branches of government. Co-equal. Our president is not above the law. Justice serves the people. It doesn't protect the powerful. Justice is blind. What we saw yesterday in plain view was another violation of the fundamental tenet of this nation. Not only do we see the failure to protect one of the three branches of our government, we also saw a clear failure to carry out equal justice. I'm sure if you used to say in the Senate, excuse a point of personal privilege. A little over an hour and a half after the chaos started, I got a text from my granddaughter, Finnegan Biden, who's a senior in her last semester at the University of Pennsylvania. She sent me a photo of military people in full military gear, scores of them lining the steps of the Lincoln Memorial because of protests by Black Lives Matter. She said, "Pop, this isn't fair. No one can tell me that if had been a group of Black Lives Matter protesting yesterday, they wouldn't have been treated very, very differently than the mob of thugs that stormed the Capitol." We all know that's true. And it is unacceptable, totally unacceptable. The American people saw it in plain view. And I hope it sensitizes them to what we have to do. Not many people know it. When Justice Garland and I were talking, we talked about, I think he raised it, the reason for the Justice Department was formed in the first place. It was back in 1870. We didn't have a Justice Department before that, the cabinet. It was formed in 1870 to enforce the Civil Rights Amendment that grew out of the Civil War, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, to stand up to the Klan, to stand up to racism, to take on domestic terrorism. This original spirit must again guide and animate its work. So as we stand here today, we do so in the wake of yesterday's events that could not more have vividly demonstrated some of the most important work we have to do in this nation. Committing ourselves to the rule of law in this nation, invigorating our domestic and democratic institutions, carrying out equal justice under the law in America. There is no more important place for us to do this work than the Department of Justice that has been so politicized. There's no more important people to carry out this work than the people I'm announcing today. More than anything, we need to restore the honor, the integrity, the independence of the Department of Justice in this nation that's been so badly damaged. And so many former leaders of that department in both parties have so testified and stated that. I want to be clear to those who lead this department who you will serve. You won't work for me. You are not the president or the vice president's lawyer. Your loyalty is not to me. It's to the law, the Constitution, the people of this nation, to guarantee justice. For Attorney General of the United States, I nominate a man of impeccable integrity, Judge Merrick Garland, one of the most respected jurists of our time, brilliant yet humble, distinguished yet modest, full of character and decency. The Supreme Court clerk served in the Justice Department during the Carter, Bush 41, and Clinton administrations, where he embraced the department's core values of independence and integrity. A federal prosecutor who took on terrorism and corruption and violent crime, always with the utmost professionalism and the duty to the oath he swore. Nominated by President Clinton to be a judge on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, considered the second most powerful court in America. Throughout such a long and distinguished career, Judge Garland has earned the praise and admiration of members of bench and bar and politicians of both parties. And despite his busy schedule and prestigious positions, he still makes time to volunteer regularly, tutoring students in Northeast D.C., as he's done for 20 years. It's about character. It's about character. It was no surprise why President Obama nominated him, Judge Garland, to the Supreme Court. As I said, he embodies honor, decency, integrity, fidelity to the rule of law, and judicial independence. To those same traits, he will now bring, as Attorney General of the United States, not as a personal attorney to the president, but as the people's lawyer. He'll restore trust in the rule of law and equal justice under the law. And I fully expect, in discussions I've had, that he will receive a fair hearing and swift confirmation. And once he's confirmed, I will move promptly to nominate his replacement on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. And I expect that the distinguished nominee will receive a prompt and fair hearing as well. For Deputy Attorney General, I nominate one of the most selfless people I've worked with, one of the brightest I've worked with. And I worked with her during the last administration. A 15-year veteran of the Justice Department, Lisa Monaco. Lisa knows the department inside and out. She is a definition of what a public servant should be: decent, trusted, honorable. And I might add, I embarrassed her a moment ago with the other colleagues, and selfless. I offered her other positions that are of greater consequence, quote unquote, more prestige. But she wanted to work with you, Judge. She wanted to go back to the Justice Department. A top flight prosecutor who took on public corruption, corporate fraud, and violent crime. Chief of Staff to the Director of the FBI, the first woman ever confirmed as Assistant Attorney General for National Security, where she elevated cybersecurity to a top priority, and where it's even more consequential today than it was then. At the White House, she was the top Homeland Security and counterterrorism advisor to President Obama and me in every one of the national security meetings. She coordinated our fight against al-Qaeda and ISIL. She helped lead our response to the Ebola crisis. When the bombs went off at the finish line on Patriots' Day in Boston, her hometown, she coordinated the federal government's response with local and state law enforcement to get to the bottom of this horrible tragedy. Lisa, I know you will help restore integrity and independence of the Department of Justice that you so revere. As Associate Attorney General, the number 3 job at the department, I nominate Vanita Gupta, a woman I've known for some time, one of the most respected civil rights lawyers in America. Started her career at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, then on to the ACLU, both organizations to which I belong, and then to the Justice Department during the Obama-Biden administration, where she led the Civil Rights Division. At every step, with every case, she fought for greater equity and the right to right the wrongs of a justice system where they existed. And she's done so by bringing people together, earning praise from across the ideological spectrum for her approach to solving some of the thorniest problems we face. During the Obama-Biden administration, Vanita was put in charge of investigating the abuse of power in police departments in Ferguson, Missouri, and other communities torn apart by acts of violence and racial injustice. She helped institute common sense police reforms to build greater equity, safety, and trust. She was commended for her work by both law enforcement and those advocating for changes in the criminal justice system. That's a rare achievement, and it speaks volumes about her capacity to unite people in common purpose, which is what this is all about, uniting the American people. Born in Philadelphia, a proud daughter of immigrants from India. That sound familiar? If confirmed, Vanita will be the first woman of color to serve as Associate Attorney General. And I'm grateful that Vanita is leaving her current job, leading one of the premier civil rights organizations in the world, as she answers the call to serve once again to ensure that our justice system is even more fair and more equitable. Thank you. For Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, I nominate Kristen Clarke, who has spent her career advocating for greater equality and equity in our justice system. The daughter of Jamaican immigrants. Now, don't think this has been designed here. I'm still looking for an Irishman. All kidding aside, the daughter of Jamaican immigrants, Kristen, is also one of the most distinguished civil rights attorneys in America. A proud native of Brooklyn, New York, she began her legal career, in the very same office she's now nominated to lead. Her previous tenure with the Justice Department saw her take on some of the most complex civil rights cases, from voting rights to redistricting challenges to prosecuting hate crimes and human trafficking. She's earned accolades throughout her career, including as the head of the Civil Rights Bureau for her home state of New York, where she's led the charge to end the school-to-prison pipeline and root out discrimination in housing and in law enforcement. She currently leads one of the nation's top civil rights organizations, where she promotes greater equity in voting rights in our education system, in in our housing system, in our justice system, and so much more. Now, she'll return full circle to pursue the vital work where her career began. The Civil Rights Division represents the moral center of the Department of Justice and the heart of that fundamental American ideal that we're all created equal and all deserve to be treated equally. I'm honored you've accepted the call to return to make real the promise for all Americans. To each of you, I thank you for your service, and to your families. And to the American people, this is a team that will restore your trust and faith in our institutions of democracy. I chaired the Judiciary Committee for many years. One of my goals in running in the first place, you may recall, I said when I saw those people coming out of the fields in Charlottesville, shouting hate, a young woman killed. And when asked, the president said there are good people on both sides. That's literally why I ran. There's no more important and heartfelt effort on my part than restoring the independence and integrity of our Justice Department. So may God bless you all. May God protect our troops and those who are sworn to protect the American people. Now I will turn it over to the team, starting with the next Attorney of the United States, Attorney General of the United States, Judge Merrick Garland. Thank you.
That's President-elect Joe Biden in a speech that he just gave decrying the violence in Washington yesterday, also accusing the president of fomenting that violence and undermining democracy with his rhetoric. He also made a series of announcements about who his own cabinet will be comprised of. And at the same time, we got some headlines in comments from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi that she is similarly supporting Senate soon-to-be Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and calling for the president's removal via the 25th Amendment. Let's bring in Kayla Tausche, who has more on all of these headlines now for us. Kayla?
Well, Kelly, the president-elect was unveiling his new team at the Department of Justice on a fitting day for the pursuit of justice. President-elect Biden saying that unlike his predecessor, who he accused of tapping my judges and my attorney general and attempting to co-opt the judiciary system for his own personal gain, the president-elect said that this team will be serving the Constitution and the United States of America. And Biden saying in a forceful repudiation of the president's approach to the Department of Justice, no president is above the law. But he did stop short of what his Democratic colleagues in leadership on Capitol Hill have been calling for at the very same time, with, as you mentioned, the soon-to-be Majority Leader Chuck Schumer calling for the immediate removal of President Trump from office, now echoed by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. And they are speaking roughly at the same time as the president-elect talking about that. So certainly we did see the president-elect stop short of making that same call, even as he did come out swinging against President Trump for his role in the actions that we saw yesterday. Kelly?
Kayla, thank you very much. Kayla Tausche, again, recapping what we've just heard from the president. Tyler?
I was just going to jump in with a question here. There's been talk on the one hand of invoking the 25th Amendment, which has a variety of procedures associated with it. The timeline certainly under normal circumstances would not fit in neatly to a 2-week period that remains in his term. The other idea was to go back to impeachment. We know how long that can take. What about the idea of some Republican leaders going to the White House, as was the case led by Barry Goldwater, as I recall, in 1974, and approaching the president, as they did then with President Nixon, and saying, it is time to go?
Well, Tyler, it's unclear that there is enough of a brain trust who shares that exact emotion, willing to deliver such a message of uniformity and uniform disdain for those actions. At this point, we've seen throughout the Trump administration, one of the hallmarks is this marketplace of ideas, these various warring factions within the administration. And even in my reporting about the discussions around the possibility of invoking the 25th Amendment that have been happening for the last 24 hours, there was not agreement, even among staff, about how to proceed here. And one of the rationales that keeps coming up is a desire, or perhaps a lack of a desire, for President Trump to be seen by his supporters in the wake of yesterday as a sort of political hero or martyr if he is forced out of office. So certainly there is some calculation of what would happen in either of these scenarios, and whether in fact he might accrue some political benefit among his supporters if in fact one of those avenues was chosen to go down.
Kayla, thank you very much. Kayla Tausche, who's been on this for the last 24 hours almost constantly. Kayla, thank you very much. Joining us now is Larry Sabato, director of the UVA Center for Politics. Larry, you and I have known each other for more than 45 years. I don't think we ever would have expected a day like we saw yesterday.
No. I might have expected it during the death throes of the Nixon administration, but it didn't happen. That's really important to remember. And Nixon was actually being sent packing. He was going to be impeached and convicted. You just mentioned the Barry Goldwater meeting with him in the White House. It's interesting that apparently there are no senators like Barry Goldwater anymore. They mainly are afraid of Donald Trump. They have been profiles in cowardice for the last 4 years, so it's not surprising that they're not following Goldwater's path. But it's still shocking. Yeah, it's absolutely shocking.
They are afraid, it would seem, of the president, or afraid of alienating his supporters, who make up some 40% or so, apparently, of the American voting area. Has democracy been permanently scarred in this country?
Well, I never use the word permanently because permanently, I hope, is a long, long time, barring an asteroid. I would like to think that we'll be able to repair the damage, but it isn't going to be easy. And there was significant damage. And I'll tell you what the immediate effect is. It's certainly domestic in part, but in foreign policy around the world, I don't think you're going to see the United States preaching about our great democratic small d system very much, at least for the next few years. The sheen is off the shining city on the hill, to use the phrase that Ronald Reagan liked to use. It's a tragedy. It's sad to see what America's reputation has become because it's been shredded by this president.
I think a lot of people use the phrase, perhaps improvidently, American exceptionalism. America doesn't seem as exceptional today as it did yesterday.
It certainly doesn't, unless you call exceptional the fact that our very strong democracy has been weakened, demonstrating, I hope, to people that if you put the wrong person in office, I'm not saying party, the wrong person in office with deep defects in character, this is what you're likely to get sooner or later.
Let's look to the future and look not, it's too trite and cliched to say silver linings, but what are the opportunities here now for the incoming President Joe Biden to help the country heal, to work with the members of a Senate where he spent most of his career? What are the opportunities that we have now, and how do we grasp them to move forward and beyond this very dark event?
Tyler, there are many. It would take your whole show, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to mention one because I'm old, and I remember specifically what happened when Nixon resigned and Ford took over. Gerald Ford was relatively unknown. He'd only been vice president for a few months when he became president. His popularity rocketed to 77%. And you know why. It's because he wasn't Richard Nixon.
because he got up early and made his own English muffins, because he went to the door of his home in Alexandria in his bathrobe and picked up the newspaper himself. He wasn't the imperial presidency. Joe Biden is an average Joe in a sense, in some ways, very accomplished, but also an average Joe. I think there will be something of that reaction, a general relief that Trump is gone. It won't be as pronounced as it was in Ford's day because we're too polarized. We're deeply polarized. But over time, we can reduce that polarization. And honestly, by providence, maybe, Joe Biden is exactly the right type of person to do that.
Let's talk a little bit, if we might, in the time we have left, about social media and its responsibility, if any, for where we find ourselves politically. I'm not deeply involved. I have an Instagram account, but I just post food pictures, you know. And I don't engage in commentary there, and I don't, in part because I find a lot of social media a cesspool for untruth and anger. How do we deal with social media and its role in our politics?
Well, first, Tyler, for many, many years, you've been excellent at food. So I wouldn't criticize yourself on that score. I've wondered myself. I spend entirely too much time on Twitter. It's addictive. I don't necessarily recommend it to people. I don't have a personal Facebook account, but they absolutely have some responsibility for what's happened over a series of years, not just during the Trump years.
True.
They're trying to reform in some ways, but it's minimal, Tyler, compared to what it should be.
Larry Sabato, thank you. Always good to see you, sir.
Thank you, Tyler.
Larry Sabato, University of Virginia. Kelly.
Tyler, thanks. And we should mention, by the way, welcome to Power Lunch, everybody. Facebook blocking President Trump's Instagram and Facebook accounts for at least 2 weeks following the chaos on Capitol Hill. The problems these days with social media giants and what they face, well, they're probably greater than the president's accounts. Here's what early Facebook investor Chamath Palihapitiya had to say about this just moments ago on Halftime.
I think Section 230 needs to change, and I think that these social media companies need to be dealt with as publishers. And I think at the front of the line is Facebook because they are algorithmically deciding. There are people inside of that company that are building these things that are amplifying the lobotomization, the intellectual cornering of people so that they cannot learn what's really happening.
Well, for more on the role that social media played in fueling yesterday's riots, I'm joined by Steve Kovac. He's a technology reporter for CNBC.com, and Joanna Stern, a senior personal technology reporter at The Wall Street Journal and a CNBC contributor. Steve, one of the things on my mind as we watch this all play out is that social media has also been a place for people to air their grievances that they feel like they have nowhere else to air, or they're frustrated with the mainstream media, or you name it. If they now feel like that's an unwelcome forum, are those grievances going to be channeled elsewhere, or do we think that they're somehow going to go away?
I don't think they're going to be channeled elsewhere. We've seen so many attempts to create alternatives to Facebook and Twitter for these kind of people who feel like they're being censored on these major platforms. Parler is still a small player. We've seen Gab try and fail to become the Twitter for the alt-right. They never work out, and that's because these platforms have gotten so large, there's nowhere else to go. Right now, it almost feels like we're lost because we're not seeing the president tweet about anything happening, and that's been the way he directly communicates with people. And what really struck me was, for years, we've been wondering, what is the moment, this fire alarm that they're going to pull that finally triggers them to suspend his account and keep him from posting? And it wasn't nuclear war. It wasn't threats of violence against the George Floyd protesters. It was people storming the Capitol. We saw real-world implications of his actions and his statements on Twitter and on Facebook, and that's why they had to pull the plug on him.
Joanna, do you think that the fact that Twitter shares are selling off more than 3% today is related to this issue, that the president was a big driver of traffic and engagement?
I think so. I mean, I think there's going to be a real question of what kind of growth or what kind of community did Trump really have on Twitter, and what kind of growth did that drive for the company? We really look at Twitter, and I've said this over the years, his superpower on Twitter isn't necessarily using Twitter to engage. It's to get the message out there. It's as the megaphone, and then getting that out and the media and others amplifying that. So I think Trump not being on Twitter, is it going to change Twitter? Sure. Is it going to change it as a company? No. But it really was just his megaphone. And so I don't want to diminish its role, but I don't know if it really could damage the company in such a severe way if he's not there.
Steve, what about the issue that Chamath raised around Section 230 and, sort of the way that companies are able to or choose to police content?
Yeah, and I largely agree with what Chamath said. These companies have not realized that they are a publisher. Just like you and I, we have a responsibility to tell the truth to our audiences. They have the responsibility, with so many people turning to these platforms for news and information, to make sure the news and information they get in front of them is true and accurate, and they just failed at that. And so many of these things, these conspiracies that were promoted by the president, start on the dark corners of the internet and kind of filter up from the dark corners to Twitter, to Reddit, to Facebook. And before you know it, the mainstream media is covering it, especially conservative media. And that's where the president sees it. And it just becomes this positive feedback loop that everyone feeds on. And this is where we are. People believe it. People believed it enough. They believed the election was stolen enough because they have this pumped in front of them constantly that without any indication from Twitter or Facebook that it's false, we saw what happened yesterday.
I'm going to just jump in here to say, and I think what we saw yesterday was just the failure of the tools to work. Yeah, I just wanted to say, yesterday we saw the failure of the other tools, the guardrails that Twitter and Facebook had been putting in place, the policies, these little labels that have been on things. What do they read? These results, election results have been disputed. These small things which weren't doing enough, which weren't blocking enough. And so yesterday's actions really show, the companies don't have their hands tied behind their backs. They don't just have to abide by small policies. They do have some power here to really restrict what's published.
Oh, they have a lot of power. I mean, they can set their terms of service to be whatever they want. That's what Section 230 allows. Whether it's a knitting website that bans comments about the president or you name it, they have very wide latitude. So I guess the issue, Joanna, is that if they feel like they need to be more stringent or more specific or whatever, then they can absolutely do it. No one says that they can't. And certainly there doesn't seem to be a need for lawmakers to codify what they can or can't do, since these situations are pretty idiosyncratic and have nothing really to do with the rest of 230 and how it might apply to a site like Yelp.
Yeah, and I think there's the difference between Facebook and Twitter. Facebook is a much larger company. The market share is bigger. They've got more antitrust eyes on them than the other tech companies. So I think for them in the last number of months, they've been more reserved. They've had their hands tied behind their back a little bit, again, by themselves. That wasn't from anybody, mostly just public opinion. And so what we've seen here is that tide has changed. And we really have to address the fact that there's only 2 weeks left, and they know who's coming next to power, and the decision was easier to make right now. And certainly there were lots of reasons to make the decision yesterday, but that's got to play into it. We know who the next president's going to be.
No, that's a great point. Yep, and in a very short time. We'll leave it there, guys. Thanks to both of you, Joanna Stern and our Steve Kovac from CNBC.com. Ty?
This whole spawned a whole lot of very, very interesting conversations. Still ahead, stocks are higher across the board. The Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ all at record highs, with tech leading the way. We will have more on that, plus Bitcoin. Oh my gosh, going wild, hitting 40,000 before sharply retreating in just the last 30 minutes. What's driving the action there? We'll tell you. Power Lunch. We'll be back after this quick break.
Through the years, you guide and protect every step along the way.
Jacob, that looks great. Thanks, Mom.
Mom, you ready?
I guess it's time. Okay, first.
What you do for them, Amica is proud to do for you, earning your trust and delivering peace of mind. With every call, every claim, we're an insurance company that meets the highest standards. Yours. Experience Amica. Auto, home, and life insurance.
Mr. Wonderful here. It's hard for everyday people to get access to startup investments. But with Start Engine, you can choose between hundreds of startups to build your portfolio. It's your turn to become a shark. Visit startengine.com today.
Guys, is this your new normal?
My problem is right in the middle.
All right here. Lose the weight with Nutrisystem for Men. Lose up to 13 pounds in your first month. Lose weight now. Money back guarantee.
I got to eat all of my favorite foods.
Make Nutrisystem for Men your new normal.
That's all I did. I ate the food, I lost the weight.
Act now and save 50% off a month of food and shakes.
Go online or call 877-959-FIT8 to save 50% on a month of food and shakes.
This is Monogram. We're an Austin, Texas-based medical technology company transforming the orthopedic market by combining state-of-the-art surgical robotics with patient-optimized implant design.
What's really unique is the software that controls the arm, because that someone would have to develop from scratch.
This is the future of orthopedics, and it is inevitable.
A unique opportunity awaits. Monogram is the future of orthopedics. Visit thebonebot.com to learn more. That's thebonebot.com.
Selling a home is hard, stressful, and can cost thousands, even in the best of times. But today, the best real estate agent matters more than ever. A HomeLight, MoveSafe certified agent sells homes faster for more money and is committed to keeping you and your family safe. From providing things like virtual showings to digital closings and following the most current health guidelines. Is your real estate agent MoveSafe certified? Find out today at HomeLight.com.
Closing the books on 2020 payrolls. Did the holidays boost hiring? Where could new COVID strains and vaccines continue to impact the workforce? December employment numbers tomorrow. Watch Squawk Box anytime on demand.
Welcome back to Power Lunch. Despite all the chaos in D.C., we've got new highs for stocks again today. The Dow's up about 400 points at the highs. We're up 225 right now. Let's get to Bob Pisani for more on today's action. Bob, a session in which we've seen a number of headliners. We've seen the Russell 2000s popping, the NASDAQ having its best day in almost 2 years.
Yeah, this is a day about breakouts. For the first time in a long time, I'm seeing a lot of new highs today. Let me just show you, and it's fairly broad-based here. First, the banks, not a lot of the big money center, but we do see Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley new highs. You see PNC Financial, Capital One. These are new 52-week highs. The stimulus is really moving cyclicals like industrials and materials. So Caterpillar, Deere, Eaton, deep global cyclicals, all hitting new highs today. Caterpillar was down, but it was new high earlier in the day. And that's helping the infrastructure story a lot here. So the material plays, Martin Marietta, Nucor, Freeport, McMoran, some of the commodity stocks, if you put up material stocks, they've all been moving. So new highs on them as well. Not a lot of tech new highs, but again, most of it's in semiconductors. Where else? That's where it's been. Mega cap tech, no new highs there, but you see all those highs. Overall, the big story, I call it the bucket story. It's really stimulus and the vaccine versus virus and the taxes. And that's the key story here. The stimulus is about more checks and infrastructure and local government, and the vaccine versus the virus is going to be the key story determining the pace of the economic recovery. That big wild card is still taxes, and we'll talk a lot more about that tomorrow, about the implications for higher capital gains. Tyler, back to you.
All right, Robert, thank you very much. The U.S. 10-year Treasury yield back above 1%. Happened yesterday, and it is there now. The first time since March for where it heads next and what investors should buy with rates rising. Here's your Trading Nation team today. Matt Maley of Miller Tabak and Nancy Tengler of Tengler Laffer Tengler Investments. It doesn't matter which name comes first, does it really, Nancy?
I don't think so, Tyler.
Not really. We're okay there. So the 10-year yield, I guess, unpredictably, I mean, it ain't exactly Bitcoin, but to see it back above 1% is surprising, isn't it, Nancy? Why is it doing that?
Well, I think what investors are starting to see is that we may get a robust reopening with the vaccine. And so rates, there's pressure on the long end for rates to rise. We actually think that with the U.S. dollar weakening and the burst of demand that we will get on reopening, that we may see cyclical inflation this year, which will continue to keep pressure on the long end. And the Fed will keep the short rates low until they hit their inflation target or change their minds. So we believe from here, bonds are riskier than stocks. So we've been putting our money in traditional banks. Finally, we warmed up to the banks a few months ago. JP Morgan, PNC. Converts and preferreds are another place that we've hidden, and then risk on equities. You know, you'll hear many people say that higher interest rates are bad for higher multiple stocks, which is generally true. But during the 5 previous periods of rising inflation, the top performing sector, technology, and it was double the next best performing sector, which was energy.
Are rising, just a quick answer here, Nancy, because you did answer the question I was going to ask next, and that is, what does this imply for where you put your money? And you told me you thought banks and cyclicals and so forth. Does rising rates imply any extra risk for the market as a whole? Is it a danger for equities overall? You seem to say no.
Well, it depends on how much and how fast. But I think at the pace we're going, the answer is no, until the Fed changes their mind on the about short rates. And then I think you have to re-examine and recalibrate.
Matt, why don't you pick up where Nancy left off? You think this will continue to be bullish for financial stocks, among others. Is there any reason to be, usually higher interest rates are what end bull markets, but I don't think you see that.
No, well, you know, it's funny, but it could cause a correction, but I don't know if that's really going to be a cause of a correction. I think there's other reasons, some of the froth in the market. But we get a correction every single year in the stock market. It's normal and healthy. But the thing is that this move above 1%, it has moved it. You know, the interest rates made a nice base over the summer. It's now broken above its trend line going back to late 2018 and made a higher high. And when you get that kind of a breakout, it usually gets to be a fairly significant one. So I could see it retracing at least half of that 2-year move and getting up to 1.8% by the end of the year. That might scare a few people by the end of the year. But overall, like I said, I've been negative or cautious on the banks for 2 years. I turned bullish in September as rates started to move up. And I think for the most part, it's a very bullish sign. I mean, remember, when the economy is doing better, the market does better. And I just say that a lot of people say, geez, higher oil prices is bad for airlines. That's not the case. They actually usually both go up in tandem. So interest rates and the stock market can go up in tandem as well. Yeah, a little bit relatively low interest rates, not moving fast, a little bit of inflation. That's usually a pretty good recipe for stocks. Matt Maley, thank you very much. Nancy of Tengler Laffer or Laffer Tengler, whichever it is, you're one of them. Thanks. All right, for more Trading Nation, head to our website or follow us on Twitter at Trading Nation. Kelly, back to you.
Thank you, Tyler. Ahead on Power Lunch, we'll continue to discuss the aftermath of the siege on Capitol Hill yesterday, what it means for both politics and for the markets. We'll speak with former New Orleans Mayor Mark Morial and economist David Rosenberg about some of the longer-term implications. Stay with us.
And now, the latest from TradingNation.CNBC.com and a word from our sponsor.
Many traders like to watch technical patterns, and one of the most popular ones is called the Golden Cross. The Golden Cross is where the 50-day moving average moves up through the 200-day moving average. And while this pattern is not intended to get you in at the very bottom, it can often be an effective entry point for a stock or ETF that's in an uptrend. I'm Randy Frederick, and Schwab is the better place for traders.
Okay. Bounced a trade idea off my firm. Same old lines. I mean, show me some technical indicators, proprietary research, something.
That's why I like Schwab. They help look out for your blind spots.
Come on, Johnny, you got this, buddy. Speaking of blind spots.
It's time to trade up. Schwab helps you see the full picture with powerful intel and trading specialists who get it. Plus, get commission-free online stock, ETF, and options trades. Schwab, the better place for traders.
Some see a grilled cheese sandwich and ask why. I see a new kitchen with a grill and ask why not.
I really need to start adding less to cart and more to savings.
Sitting on this couch so long made me want to make some changes, starting with this couch.
Yeah, I need a house with a different view. And this is the bank that will help you do it all. Because at U.S. Bank, our people are dedicated to turning your new inspiration into your next pursuit.
See yourself.
Welcome back to the mirror.
And know you're not alone. Because this,
Come on, Jesse, one more.
is a reflection of an unstoppable community. In the mirror.
Mr. Wonderful here. It's hard for everyday people to get access to startup investments. But with Start Engine, you can choose between hundreds of startups to build your portfolio. It's your turn to become a shark. Visit startengine.com today.
Tonight, Ted Danson is Mr. Mayor.
You're not the mayor. I'm the mayor.
Well, let's just agree to disagree, shall we?
Mayor fight! Mayor fight!
Mr. Mayor premieres tonight on NBC.
No more waiting. This year is gonna be different. My New Year's resolution, get happy.
Hey, can you adjust my strap? Girl, you need Lively. Front adjusters. Mom, you need Lively. Rollable, no-wire bras. Babe, you need Lively. J-hooks. It's not just a bra, it's a movement. All bras for $35 at wearlively.com.
Hey, I'm Nick. We created Gabi because most people overpay for car insurance. Gabi is a free tool that saves you money by finding the best deal. Gabi saves users over $800 a year on average. Go to Gabi.com and stop overpaying for car insurance.
Welcome back to Power Lunch, everybody. Stocks are at record highs today, with the NASDAQ leading the gains up 2.4%. Tech and consumer discretionary stocks, no surprise, are leading the way. But we want to turn back to the broader economy and the impact this week's unrest could have longer term. Steve Leisman is here for more on that. Steve?
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, the Business Roundtable becoming one of the lobby groups one of the largest businesses in America, becoming one of the lobby groups to condemn yesterday's violence and placing the blame squarely at the feet of the president and his supporters' perpetuation of a confirmed fiction of election fraud. They said in their statement yesterday's inexcusable violence and chaos at the Capitol makes clear that elected officials' perpetuation of the fiction of a fraudulent 2020 presidential election is not only reprehensible, but also a danger to our democracy, our society, and our economy. Broadly, business has spoken out, both with what seems genuine concern, but also an eye towards their own reputation and knowing democracy and democratic stability lie at the heart of a well-functioning economy. The usually conservative National Manufacturers Association called for Vice President Pence to consider invoking the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office. Former IMF chief economist Raghuram Rajan, also the former governor of the Bank of India, he told me there are global and domestic implications. The world, he said, looks to the United States as the beacon of democracy, which is itself is a reason to trust its markets and have faith that the rule of law will be respected. What is happening today, and it was yesterday, by the way, weakens that trust. Worse, it undermines the fight against authoritarians around the world. Kelly, almost 30 years ago, as a reporter, I watched the storming of the Russian White House in Moscow by communists who were opposed to democracy. A big question in post-Soviet Russia then was the importance of democracy and democratic stability to markets. And I thought I'd never be reporting that story here in the U.S. I guess I was yesterday. Tyler?
Yeah, it really was. It was pictures that were reminiscent of that, or reminiscent of Greece in 2011 with crowds in the street in front of the Parliament building there. It was something we never expected to see here. Steve, thank you. For more on the fallout from the riots on Capitol Hill and the path ahead, let's chat with Mark Morial, former mayor of New Orleans and the president and CEO of the National Urban League.
Hi, Ty.
Mayor, good to see you as always. Let me add, I mean, there was a lot, obviously, state the obvious, a lot of anger and a lot of rage in that crowd yesterday, a sense of disenfranchisement among those individuals who marched from downtown up to Capitol Hill. How much of that do you think is, in any sense, a reaction to the idea that Congress failed to bring forth a stimulus bill of the size Americans want?
I feel it had very little to do with that. That may have been sort of an added incentive for anger. what I see as an organized political act, something that channeled some outrage and disappointment at losing the election, but was organized. The permit for the rally was held by the names of Rudy Giuliani, Roger Stone, Diamond and Silk, all well-known Trump operatives. They had a hand in organizing what took place. Without the impulse, the support, and the organization, and the drum beating and the compulsion of political leaders like President Trump and his allies, these individuals would not have come to Washington, D.C., would not have chosen to go beyond the bright line of exercising dissent into violence and insurrection and rioting. I heard before COVID took place from many people who, quote unquote, represented the Trump faction that we've never had it better. The economy is as great as ever. Then you hear a litany of grievances that we feel disenfranchised. This is really about losing an election fair and square. And I think trying to posit a story of fraud, a fiction of the election being stolen, the American people have to see what it is. We respect, and I will always defend the right of people to speak and to exercise dissent. But the idea that it could descend into violence, that you could storm the Capitol, you could break windows, you could destroy property, and ultimately 4 people are dead, goes beyond what a democracy should tolerate, goes beyond what a country based on the rule of law should in fact sanction. So those who did this have to be brought to justice.
How do we heal?
Incited and organized
How do we heal, Mayor Morial? How do we heal?
We have to heal, Ty. We can't heal unless we purge the cancer of hate and intolerance from the American soul. We can't have sort of what I call a fictional or superficial unity that doesn't strike at the heart, that we've got to have a consensus around values, opportunity, equity, tolerance, and dissent. That those of us who have aggressively objected to many of the policies of Donald Trump never even considered that we would storm the Capitol, that despite the outrage, despite many years of injustice, that we would go beyond the rules of engagement in order to express our point of view. This healing that has to take place has to recognize the need to end the vestiges of hatred and intolerance in the American soul, be it racial, be it religious, be it regional, be it intolerance for dissenting political points of views. That is what is so essential. It's foundational to let's find some common ground in the country. Now, what we can say is let's vigorously debate. Let's aggressively assert what we believe, but let's recognize some fundamental rules of engagement. Let's embrace some common values. America is a nation based on a set of values, equal opportunity,
right,
justice, and fairness. That's the definition of freedom.
Yeah, the rules of engagement, as you point out, the rules of engagement, we have to leave it here, Mayor, I'm sorry to say, but the rules of engagement, the rules of civil discourse, the rules of political behavior seem to have been in decline for some time. For many, many reasons, and I'm not pointing fingers at any particular individual or group of individuals. It just seems to be that way. Mayor Morial, we'll continue this conversation,
Let me just say one last thing, Simon.
Please.
Elected leaders have a responsibility to lead by example.
Correct.
And I think that's what's so important to leadership. You have to role model, if you will, the behavior and the conduct you want your followers
Well, I think that's absolutely true, and just to make the point one more time before we go, and I said I don't want to point fingers at any one individual, but I will say this: behaviors, whether they are rhetorical or they are things like tearing up the State of the Union address on the podium in the House of Representatives, that is poor political behavior. I'll leave it there. Mayor Morial, thank you. Kelly.
Tyler, stocks are building on yesterday's gains with everything going on that you just discussed. The NASDAQ is leading the way this time. It actually closed lower yesterday, but it's powering higher by 2.4%. Big tech is making an impact on the Dow today, though. Apple, Microsoft, and Salesforce are among the big gainers for its 0.75% gain. What's driving these gains, and can they continue with Apple up 3%? Power Lunch will be right back.
The Bond Report is brought to you by PIMCO, a global leader in active fixed income.
Of all the companies on the Fortune 500 in the year 2000, more than half no longer exist. Digital transformation isn't just a good idea. It's a matter of corporate survival. Enterprise AI enables organizations to use artificial intelligence at enterprise scale, solving previously unsolvable business problems to help you not just survive, but thrive. C3.ai. This is Enterprise AI.
When it's time to sell your home, there's a lot of money on the line. How can you trust your real estate agent will get it right? There's good news. With HomeLight, you can compare actual performance data on thousands of agents near you, so you know who sells quickly, who sells for the best price. We'll match you with the perfect agent for your needs. And best of all, it's free. Sell your home for more money. Go to HomeLight.com today.
Closing the books on 2020 payrolls. Did the holidays boost hiring? Where could new COVID strains and vaccines continue to impact the workforce? December employment numbers tomorrow. Watch Squawk Box anytime on demand.
This is my first time trying on glasses at home.
I went to Warby Parker's website and I picked 5 frames that I really liked. These are really cute.
Ooh. Ah. Hey.
The virtual try-on is perfect. Like, they look like they're on my face. Like, look at this. Just swipe and switch.
Love these. Look at them.
I think these out of one.
That was so easy. They make it so fun and fabulous.
Egypt Cancer Network is a U.S.-based nonprofit organization that supports the treatment of pediatric cancer patients for free at the Children's Cancer Hospital in Egypt, 57357, the most advanced pediatric cancer hospital in the region, providing free cancer treatment to thousands of children. Please call 877-573-5757 or go to EgyptCancerNetwork.org to make a donation now. Your tax-free gift can save the life of a child battling cancer. Help us bring their laughter back. Donate today.
Welcome back. All 3 major averages are hitting record highs again today. The NASDAQ is the big winner, up 2.4%. Our next guest says it's all about stimulus and that the blue wave might be more bullish than investors originally thought. Joining us now is David Rosenberg. He's president of Rosenberg Research. David, it's good to have you back. Do you seriously think we're going to have $2 trillion worth of stimulus coming down the pike now?
I think it's probably going to come fairly soon. And we know that because when we got the $900 billion that was already passed, Joe Biden said, well, that's a down payment. But when he said it, Mitch McConnell was head of the Senate, not Chuck Schumer. So I would say that the odds that we get something very big, something close to what the Democrats wanted, initially is probably going to come very quickly. And that's exactly, it's the stimulus, Kelly. This market thrives on monetary and fiscal policy stimulus. That's what this is all about. That's why investors could look through the horrific events yesterday on Capitol Hill. It is all about the stimulus. And, you know, you're asking me whether we're going to get it or not. I'm assuming we will. But the markets have already priced that in. That's what we're seeing every day for the past couple of days.
Well, that's pretty extraordinary, because if we don't get it, then that's going to leave a $2 trillion hole in expectations. So let's turn this into GDP terms. If I'm reading you correctly here, you think this means we go from basically flat or zero GDP growth to upwards of 7%?
Right. Well, without any stimulus at all, that's why I want to go back and say, you know, is the economy fundamentally weak or fundamentally strong? You know, it's really hard to say. But look, the training wheels are still on the bicycle. If we didn't get any stimulus at all, let's say nothing got passed, I would actually say that first quarter GDP would be negative. With the stimulus that's already coming in, we'll probably be 3% plus. That's what the stimulus already in. And you're right, if we get the extra dosage, which is what the Democrats want, and now they're running the show. I'm not so sure it's a blue wave, but they do have more control than we thought they did just a few days ago. That all of a sudden, you know, first quarter growth could easily be 7%, given that amount of stimulus that'll come out of the pipe.
So when, you know, how much is too much, Dave? Because we are seeing the 10-year back up, inflation expectations above 2%, the Fed's starting to talk about a taper, or is this simply the way that the fiscal side pushes them to start shrinking the balance sheet and normalizing? Right. Well, look, the taper is still very much conditional, and I think would take place earliest late this year under the proviso that we really get sustained acceleration in growth. And we have to take a look at, you know, where we are right now. I mean, we'll get a fresh employment number tomorrow. The unemployment rate is 6.7%. But, you know, when you're taking a look at the percentage of the labor force that's unemployed and underemployed, I mean, you have 1 in 8 Americans right now that fit that category. There's still a tremendous amount of excess supply in the product market, in the labor market. I mean, the inflation people are talking about is primarily because the dollar's been weak and you've had the commodity bounce back. But you're not going to get inflation without wages, right? It's not going to happen. So I think that it's very much conditional. The Fed's getting ahead of it right now, just, you know, talking about it. I don't think it's going to happen until we get really sustainable, strong growth. So that's still an if. Still. It's already on the table this early in the year. Dave, thanks so much. Dave Rosenberg. Ty? You too.
Kelly, thank you very much. The markets are decidedly higher at this hour. Thanks for watching Power Lunch. Closing bell starts now.
It certainly does. Thank you, Tyler and Kelly. Welcome to the Closing Bell. I'm Wilfred Frost, along with Sarah Eisen. Stocks climbing despite high tensions in Washington following yesterday's riots on Capitol Hill. NASDAQ leading the gains today, climbing up above 13,000 for the first time ever. Let's have a look at what's driving the action. Congress officially confirming Joe Biden as the next president of the United States early this morning in a session delayed by a mob breaching the U.S. Capitol. On the economic front, jobless claims coming in a bit better than expected at 787,000, and the ISM Services Index also topped estimates. And as we mentioned, tech leading the charge today. Facebook, Microsoft, Alphabet, and Amazon all up 2% or so. Tesla climbing some 7% on the session. Elon Musk, the richest man in the world. 59 minutes left in the session, Sarah.
Yeah, stocks just keep surging, Wilfred. Ahead on today's show, business leaders weighing in on the unrest in D.C. We're going to talk to former Facebook Chief Security Officer Alex Stamos, who called yesterday on Facebook and Twitter to cut the president off from those platforms. More moves from the social media giants today on that front. And billionaire investor Nelson Peltz of Trian Partners, who has been a longtime supporter and friend of President Trump, out with this statement. Quote, "We condemn President Trump's efforts to overturn the election results, which culminated in yesterday's shocking events at our Capitol. This president must commit to a peaceful transfer of power. We also implore President-elect Biden and congressional leaders to stop the infighting and work together for the good of our country. Every single American citizen deserves better governance." Nelson Peltz joins us now by phone for a Closing Bell exclusive. Nelson, thank you for phoning in. Wanted to give you the chance to just expand on your statement with further reaction to those just incredibly shocking terrible scenes that we saw, violent riots at the Capitol yesterday, and the president egging them on.
First of all, Happy New Year, Sarah. And it's been quite a year so far. I thought last year was difficult. This one's off to a horrible start in what we all saw occurred yesterday in D.C. I mean, it was so sad. It was scary. Whoever said it is a stain on America. You know, what we've learned is that we cannot continue to have our elected officials fight with one another. The enemy is outside the room. The enemy is not across the aisle. But what happened yesterday is a disgrace, and as an American, I'm embarrassed. You know, I didn't vote for Trump in 2016. I voted for him in this past election, November. Today, I'm sorry I did that. I supported many of his policies, which I still think were good ones, trade efforts, economic policies. I think they're good for our country. But so much good was undone yesterday with what we all saw. And my partners and I all felt that we needed to speak out, and that's why we issued that statement. You know, it's America has been through hell and back. It's become so tribal. And I just hope that President-elect Biden will act to bring us together. He's got full control of both houses. He needs to do that. We need to heal from Trump. It was really a devastating blow. And we just can't go on. And, you know, Black Lives Matter took a lot of heat from certain sectors. And yesterday, with what was going on, I saw at least one demonstrator standing in Congress, I don't know whether it was the Senate or the House, with a Camp Auschwitz T-shirt on.
I saw that.
Nobody really got so upset about that. I mean, there's a lot more to be upset about by comparison to how upset they were about Black Lives Matter. I mean, that kind of stuff, there's no place for it in our world. I mean, we're supposed to not be doing this.
100%. You do point the finger squarely at President Trump, and you just said that you regret voting for him in the last election. Do you regret the support, financial, friendship you've had with him? A lot of people do look at business leaders like yourself and wonder if you've enabled him. He's always had sort of these inclinations and these behaviors, even though, as you say, you've been very supportive of the policies, a lot of them economic.
Look, the policies, the economic policies that Trump put forth with our Secretary of Treasury's help, which were great policies. There's something we need in America for decades. We've exported tens of millions of jobs, and finally we had a prescription to bring them back. And I hope Biden doesn't throw the baby out with the bathwater and take some of that to heart and stay with it. But there is no room for what happened yesterday. We're not a banana republic. This is the United States. And for what happened yesterday, and unfortunately, I have to say it was garnered by our leadership. Our leadership has got to understand what the priorities are. The priorities are America first. Then if you want to support your party, that's fine. But it must be America first. And that was out the window since this election was over. And Trump could have taken a different tack. He could have accepted the results. He could have offered his friendship, his support, and his help for a transition to Biden. Had he done that, his legacy would be 180 degrees different from what it is today. And that legacy...
You think this will be his legacy?
Unfortunately, it's hard to believe that it's going to be something other than this. I mean, we have people shooting at each other in Congress. I mean, it's beyond belief. And how could you say that is anything but his legacy? You know, I come from, I have a large family. I have 10 kids, and I got to tell you, some are Republicans and some are Democrats. And I argued with my Democrats because I felt that they didn't understand the economic implications of what the Trump administration has put forth. But all the good was gone, was thrown out over the course of the last month and finished yesterday. It just, there's no place here for that. I mean, I am emotionally upset, and it takes a lot to get me upset. I've been through a lot, but I've never seen anything like what I saw yesterday, and I would never have believed it happened in our country. I hope that yesterday.
Mick Mulvaney, yeah.
I hope we can learn from yesterday. I'm hoping that yesterday was a real turning point. We need to get out of this pandemic. We need to deal with some pressing issues, climate change, etc. Our leaders have to get to work. They have to work together. And we have to make yesterday a distant memory.
100%. I'm just going to bring up something that Mick Mulvaney said that I wanted to ask you about on Squawk Box earlier this morning. You know, he also stepped down in protest from his position with the administration and was asked about joining the administration to begin with. He said that the president is a very different person than he was, say, 8 months ago. Do you agree with that? Have you spoken with the president at all in recent weeks about this issue?
I haven't spoken to him in the last several weeks because somebody put a new thing on my phone that says spam risk, and that spam risk put the White House calls in that category. So every time I got a call from the White House, it showed up. And yeah, really, because that's just the way it happened, and I didn't realize that until yesterday. But day before yesterday, pardon me. But, this is, and Trump did a lot of very good things. He really did. He did things that neither Republican nor Democrat had taken on. And he took it on successfully. And he started to change the way we dealt with our trading partners, our financial enemies, and our military enemies. And that was good. But with this was way beyond anything I'd ever seen. And Trump, the election, not to take anything away from President-elect Biden, it was Trump against Trump. Trump lost to Trump. That's what happened. And it's unfortunate. And I just hope that President-elect Biden will pick up the pieces and make yesterday a turning point for this country, because we really need it.
Before that, there are concerns about what the next 13 days are going to look like, Nelson, with the Democratic leaders now calling for invoking the 25th Amendment. Is that something you think should be done? Is there a risk here, a security risk here of President Trump remaining in power for 2 weeks?
Look, I'm not a constitutional expert. I'm terribly disturbed by how polarized our government has become. In my humble opinion, they should let the next week and a half go by. We don't need any more of this. And let's move on to President-elect Biden. Let's swear him in. Let's hope that he understands where the center is, because this country operates way better between center-right and center-left than any of the other stuff we're seeing. We see so many people who are preaching socialism for this country. It doesn't work. There's no place in the world it's ever worked. And why people think that it can work here is beyond me. I mean, if they want to spend the next 10 days removing Trump from office, my God, we've got so many more important things to work through. We've got a pandemic. We've got all the other stuff that needs to be dealt with. We've got a pandemic that's now mutating into something that's more difficult to deal with. Let's deal with positive things and go forward. Trump's leaving office on the 20th. So be it. Let's move on.
Well, I think the concern is he really has not strongly condemned what happened yesterday. And it's not really clear that, I guess he's committed to the peaceful transfer of power after last night, but still contesting this election and still the language that he continues to use, I think people are afraid could continue to rally his supporters and the mobs like we saw yesterday.
Look, if that's what he's doing, then he's a greater fool than even I would think he would be. I mean, the election occurred. America has spoken. Okay, what else do we need? We had people killed yesterday in the most hallowed place in the world is our Congress. People killed there yesterday. And we're still contesting an election. Yeah, look, it was close, but that's what happens. Somebody comes in first and somebody comes in second. And where President Trump doesn't like to come in second, he did. He did. And move on like a gentleman and give Biden your best. And let's hope that he can bring some healing into our nation. But to sit there and contest this further, I think, is just more fuel on the fire, which is so unnecessary.
Quick question about campaign financing. I mean, do you think you and others who have donated to his campaign bear any responsibility? And will you rethink how you allocate money to politicians, Republicans say, who supported this effort going forward?
You know, first of all, I want to tell you, I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm an independent, registered as such. Okay, and today, unfortunately, before yesterday, if you disagreed with a Democrat, you were an extreme conservative. The fact is, I voted for Al Gore. I voted for Clinton in his second term, not in his first. So I voted for Democrats before, and probably and hopefully will do it again if they represent what I believe they should represent. And do I think that we have a right to, there are campaign contribution rules, and if Congress wants to change them, then so be it. Let me tell you something. It saved me a lot of money, a lot less mail, email, and otherwise if they did it. And a lot of time.
Yeah.
So go for it, Congress.
And a lot of spam calls. Finally, Nelson, just want to ask you about the markets. Dow's up 230, above 31,000. It surged yesterday, which was just an odd juxtaposition against some of these scenes. Continues to power higher. Does that make sense to you? Are you a buyer off of the new government having Democrats control all three houses?
The market shocked me yesterday. Really shocked me. I refused to look at any prices at all yesterday. I didn't look at the market until I got my report about 5 or 6 o'clock to see how we had done, and I thought there was a typo. and yet it continues to do the same today, which says there's hope for America, I think, or rampant inflation coming, I don't know which. You've got Democrats that have been elected, and as a result, they're going to spend a lot of money, and in this time, I think they should. And Trump spent a lot of money, too, and we needed to spend the money then, and we need to spend more money now. I really worry about America's balance sheet. The only thing that gives me some peace is that probably the rest of the world's balance sheet, with rare exception, probably looks like ours. And maybe we have a complete worldwide restructuring. Some of the Chapter 11 lawyers who might be listening will have a ball with that one. But I do worry about that, but we're not alone in doing that, and I think we get a pass today for doing that. So I can understand the market. I am really surprised that it went the way it went, and it says that America wants a change. They really do. I mean, the last 4 years were very intense for America. And what I said, when you get on a plane, you root for the pilot. I was rooting for Trump in 2017. I'm rooting for Biden in 2021. And that's the only way I think every American should approach this. Forget who you voted for. We're all Americans, okay? And we've got to root for the CEO. It's Joe Biden. Some Americans are not happy with it. Too bad. That's what we got, and let's go with it, and let's give him our support, and let Congress finally come together and do what's right for this country instead of what partisan politics tells them they should be doing. So we can make yesterday, Sarah, into a turning point. And I hope we can do that.
Well, I thank you for coming on to talk honestly about your support and how you're feeling today. Nelson, always good to hear from you.
Thank you. Bye.
Nelson Peltz of Trian, Wilfred. As the president grows increasingly isolated here today with some of the reactions we're getting.
Indeed, certainly does. And 41 minutes left of the session. We're up 1.5% on the S&P. Still ahead, we'll hear from more business leaders with reaction to yesterday's events and how the country moves forward. Former Facebook Chief Security Officer Alex Stamos will weigh in on social media's actions over the last 24 hours. And later, we'll hear from the CEO of the National Retail Federation, who called yesterday a sad and distressing day for our country. You're watching Closing Bell.
When the future first arrives, we often don't recognize it. Interactive Brokers founder Thomas Peterffy brought the future to the floor of the American Stock Exchange in 1983. The company had fabricated Wall Street's first mobile computer, and it changed finance forever. Today, Interactive Brokers continues to push finance forward by building the latest technology you need to increase your success. Move your account to Interactive Brokers.
Mr. Wonderful here. It's hard for everyday people to get access to startup investments. But with Start Engine, you can choose between hundreds of startups to build your portfolio. It's your turn to become a shark. Visit startengine.com today.
I need to sell my house. Now, there are a lot of places that claim to know how much it's worth, but they don't really know my house or my neighborhood. And they definitely don't show me all my options. That's where HomeLight comes in. I just answer a few questions, and HomeLight gives me a side-by-side comparison of my options, personalized for my needs. And they'll show me what verified buyers will pay for my house right now. It's easy, and it's free. No matter how you choose to sell your home, selling starts at HomeLight. Get started today at HomeLight.com.
This is Monogram. We're an Austin, Texas-based medical technology company transforming the orthopedic market by combining state-of-the-art surgical robotics with patient-optimized implant design. Monogram is the future of orthopedics. Visit thebonebot.com.
Get an edge. Invest like a pro. Access CNBC's live streams around the globe. Unparalleled access to CNBC experts. Actionable investor insight and ideas. Start your free trial today at cnbc.com/pro.
Medical school was very stressful. I lost a lot of hair during that time. Nutrafol is 100% drug-free and it's natural. You can't argue with clinical proof.
Start your hair growth journey at Nutrafol.com. No more waiting. This year is gonna be different. My New Year's resolution, get happy.
Hi, I'm Hanno. I created Gabi because most people overpay on car insurance. Gabi is a free tool that saves you money by finding the best deal. Gabi users save more than $800 per year on average. Go to Gabi.com and stop overpaying for car insurance.
Chloe, where are you?
Chloe! Sorry, I was entranced. Elmo was able to overlook her predispositions and now embarks on the most wonderful friendship.
Well, we are keeping that book, aren't we?
Literati. Keep the books you love, return the ones you don't for free.
Welcome back. Let's get up to Mike for a look at the market action today. Mike, another strong day.
Yeah, steady in its strength, actually. Wolfie bobbed up around 3,800 in the S&P 500 in the morning, been mostly sideways to an upward tilt just in the last few minutes here. Got a 2-year chart of the index just to show that in the past couple of years, we have entered the year in a very similar kind of steady, orderly uptrend. This is about a 3% gut check in mid-late January of last year, and then we were coming off a low in early 2019, but very similar, very tight. Now, we also talked about how the market kind of sat still on an index basis through much of December into this year. It allowed some of the overheated stuff to cool off. Today, it's very much a FANG mega cap-led move. So if those stocks which remain below their highs and have gone sideways for months, if they start to catch a breeze, maybe that's the thing that holds the market together, even though it's getting a little bit stretched to the upside again. Long-term chart of small caps versus the NASDAQ 100. This goes back to the mid-90s, and I like the fact that we're basically on a relative basis looking at some of those historic lows. Now, what was going on here? Tech bubble, NASDAQ was ripping higher, small caps were abandoned. Now, when this turned around and small caps came roaring back, that was in the context of a bear market. It was when tech stocks and mega caps in general were collapsing. So it wasn't just that small caps were strong. So a lot of people are getting very excited about this turn higher. Maybe it's got more to run, and certainly perhaps so, but it doesn't mean it's going to be one of these kind of mega turns that it's many, many years running where small caps kind of win, because it takes a lot else to happen on a relative basis for that to be the case. Very similar look at long-term treasury yields, very long-term, 55 years. Also some chatter out there that maybe finally the 35-year bull market in bonds and declining yields has turned. Well, look at how tiny this looks in retrospect. We're just curled up from about 0.5% to 1.07%. Again, you know, it's sort of like looking at these very long downtrends, and there's plenty of room to go up here, like above 2%, without even suggesting that it's a megaturn. Finally, we thought it was over there. We thought the bull market was over there, too, in bonds. So we've had head fakes of this sort in the past, but right now still looks like headroom for yields, even if it's not a mega generational turn, guys.
Every year, the strategists call the end of the bull market for bonds, and every year
that's
they're
very
wrong.
true, Sarah.
Mike,
although this year, I think in a very muted way. Almost nobody thought they're going to go up above 1.5% or so. So who knows if that psychology is still working the same direction this year.
Right, as we surpass 1%. Mike, thank you. 36 minutes or so left to go before the bell. Take a look at the markets. We're still surging on stocks. The Dow's up more than 200 points. The high of the day was 364. Walgreens, Apple, JP Morgan powering the Dow higher. The S&P up 1.6%, but as Mike said, it's the NASDAQ that's leading the charge, up 2.6%. There's a new person on top of the global wealth leaderboard. We'll tell you who it is next. Plus, a huge move again today for Bitcoin, setting a new record high, breaking above $40,000. We've come off those highs, still up 4.5% above $38,000. Tom Lee from Fundstrat will be coming up. He has made some big bullish calls on Bitcoin. You won't want to miss that on Closing Bell.
We did it! Wherever you start, SNHU is where you can finish.
Here we go.
And it's it.
Yay! Southern New Hampshire University.
That gets a hook.
Look at that! Master's degree! I did it!
I did this for my children. I am very proud of myself.
Finish your degree at snhu.edu.
Mr. Wonderful here. It's hard for everyday people to get access to startup investments. But with Start Engine, you can choose between hundreds of startups to build your portfolio. It's your turn to become a shark. Visit startengine.com today.
Introducing Schwab Stock Slices. For as little as $5, now anyone can own companies in the S&P 500, even if their shares cost more. At $5 a slice, you could own 10 companies for $50 instead of paying thousands. All commission-free online. Schwab Stock Slices, an easy way to start investing or to give the gift of stock ownership. Schwab, own your tomorrow.
We're excited to do business with you, but before we sign, I gotta ask.
Sure, anything.
We searched you online, and maybe you can explain this?
Can't believe that garbage is still coming in. That is so false.
Frustrated with your online search results? Call Reputation Defender today to join tens of thousands who've improved their online reputation. Get your free reputation report card at reputationdefender.com or call 1-877-866-8555.
The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted some key disparities that are weighing on economic advancement for many people. A new survey out highlighting what some teams think are the key issues.
Most teams believe there is a lack of equal economic opportunity in the U.S. based on race, ethnicity, and gender. A key obstacle is the pay gap.
What we do with that data is, promote the conversation and then have the education.
Take charge of your financial wellness at cnbc.com/investin.you.
Welcome back. There's a new person on top of the global wealth leaderboard. Elon Musk officially becoming the richest person in the world today with a net worth of more than $185 billion, surpassing Amazon's Jeff Bezos. Tesla stock already up double digits this year after climbing more than 700% last year. Musk reacting to the news on Twitter with 6 words in 2 tweets. How strange and, well, back to work. Sarah, extraordinary run. There's always an amazing metric of Tesla's share price performance. The one that stands out most to me, mid-November or so, it's almost doubled from there, which is pretty extraordinary given, of course, the returns it had throughout the earlier part of last year anyway.
Best performing stock in the S&P, which it just joined for 2020, up more than 700%, and another 7% today. Crazy. Time now for a CNBC COVID update with Sue Herrera. Hi, Sue.
Hello, Sarah. Hello, everybody. We start, unfortunately, with some grim news from the West Coast. At more than 1,000, it is California's biggest 2-day death toll of the pandemic, with almost 600 of those deaths reported today. The state's overall total count is above 28,000. A CDC study published today estimates that 59% of all COVID-19 transmissions are from people without any symptoms. That is the sum of the 35% who experience symptoms later and 24% who actually never develop symptoms. The CDC also reporting today a link between in-person college classes and COVID cases. It looked at data from 101 counties with large colleges and universities which resumed classes late last summer. It saw a 56% increase in cases in the county if classes were in person, but an 18% decrease when remote learning was in place. You are up to date. Something to think about, Wilf, as we go into the spring semester. Back to you.
Certainly is, Sue. Thank you. See you again next hour. Still ahead, Facebook says it will block President Trump from posting for the remainder of his term. We'll speak with the company's former chief security officer, who yesterday called on Facebook and Twitter to take action like that. As we head to break, here's a check on bond yields climbing once again. The 10-year holding comfortably above 1%, 1.07 where we stand. Closing bell back in a couple.
The Bond Report is brought to you by PIMCO, a global leader in active fixed income.
These people are here to pick up the same prescription. They both know drug costs are out of control, but one of them is taking back control with GoodRx. So while he's paying that much, she's paying this much. Stop paying too much for your prescriptions. Download the free app today.
Keeping your oyster business growing has you swamped. You need to hire.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. The moment you sponsor a job on Indeed, you get a short list of quality candidates from our resume database. Claim your $75 credit when you post your first job at Indeed.com/promo.
Guys, living on junk food? Stop. Eat real food that tastes great and lose weight with Nutrisystem for Men.
You just select, heat, and eat, and you're going to lose the weight.
Lose up to 13 pounds your first month. Money back guaranteed. Check us out today.
Heat up the food. That's it.
Act now and save 50% off a month of food and 50% off a month of shakes.
Go online or call 888-621-FIT9 to save 50% on a month of food and shakes.
MoonPod, a breakthrough in relaxation that's quickly becoming the world's most popular beanbag. Our custom zero-gravity bead technology acts as your personalized cushioning system. MoonPod is the most comfortable place in the universe. Try yours today at moonpod.co.
Tonight, the growing calls for the president to be removed, plus the search for those who attacked the Capitol, and the security fears for the inauguration just days away.
The facts, the truth, the news with Shepard Smith, 7 Eastern, CNBC.
We're excited to do business with you, but before we sign, I gotta ask.
Sure, anything.
We searched you online, and maybe you can explain this?
Can't believe that garbage is still coming in. That is so false.
Frustrated with your online search results? Call Reputation Defender today to join tens of thousands who've improved their online reputation. Get your free reputation report card at reputationdefender.com or call 1-877-866-8555.
Forget the waiting room of a doctor's office. With PlushCare, the waiting room is this big. From your phone, you can book an appointment with the top doctor in minutes. We take most major insurances, and you pick a prescription when ready. Download PlushCare.
Best deal. Gabby saves users over $800 a year on average. Go to Gabby.com and stop overpaying for car insurance.
26 minutes left of trade. Facebook and Instagram now blocking President Trump from the platforms until his term ends. Alex Stamos, Facebook's former chief security officer, joins us next to discuss here on Closing Bell.
Why are so many people turning to SuperBeets Crystals? Because SuperBeets Crystals give you the energy and blood pressure support you want from real beets without the beet taste.
It's amazing that something so simple can be this great for my heart.
It tastes good, and it's healthy for me, and it's healthy for my blood pressure. I love it.
SuperBeets is giving me a different energy that I never had before. I feel more active. It's fantastic, tastes good, and it works.
Inspired by the Nobel Prize-winning discovery of nitric oxide as a blood vessel signaling molecule, SuperBeets' delicious apple-flavored crystals unlock the nitric oxide boosting power of beet nutrients to help widen your blood vessels, supporting healthy blood flow.
By supporting healthy blood flow, you're helping your body produce energy more efficiently.
That's why over 120 professional and college sports teams use our beet crystals.
I'm Hunter Kemper. I'm a 4-time Olympian in the sport of triathlon. SuperBeets, it helped me win big races late into my 30s. It's increasing your circulation, and that's why this product is so amazing.
Call now and find out how to get a free 30-day supply of SuperBeets plus a free travel pack of our delicious SuperBeets Chews with added grapeseed extract for powerful antioxidant support.
It is like my battery pack. I throw it in my purse or my gym bag, and I am great to go.
You'll also receive a free kit of nitric oxide indicator strips to measure your results.
With SuperBeets, I could feel a difference, but with the strips, you could actually see a difference.
Act now, and we'll even include free shipping and free returns, all backed by our 90-day money-back guarantee.
At my age, I want to do everything I can for my health, and I feel super good about doing something healthy for my blood pressure.
So do something good for your heart.
This offer is only available if you call 1-800-504-7610 or go to trysuperbeets.com. So call 1-800-504-7610 or visit trysuperbeets.com right now.
We're excited to do business with you, but before we sign, I gotta ask.
Sure, anything.
We searched you online, and maybe you can explain this?
Can't believe that garbage is still coming in. That is so false.
Frustrated with your online search results? Call Reputation Defender today to join tens of thousands who've improved their online reputation. Get your free reputation report card at reputationdefender.com or call 1-877-866-8555.
Closing the books on 2020 payrolls. Did the holidays boost hiring? Where could new COVID strains and vaccines continue to impact the workforce? December employment numbers tomorrow. Watch Squawk Box anytime on demand.
Social media companies taking action against President Trump's accounts following yesterday's Capitol riots. Facebook announcing it will extend its original 24-hour block on Trump's Facebook and Instagram account indefinitely and at least until his term is complete. Twitter removing Trump's video addressing Capitol rioters from its platform, as well as locking his account for 12 hours. It also warned that if the president continues to violate Twitter's rules, it would result in a permanent suspension of his account. For more, let's bring in Alex Stamos, former Chief Security Officer at Facebook. Very good afternoon to you, Alex. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
What's your reaction to Facebook's decision to to block his account indefinitely?
So I think it was the right move to make yesterday. That all of the tech companies have a really difficult balancing challenge here, which is that we as a society don't want incredibly powerful corporations deciding who are legitimate speakers in a democracy. And so as a result of that, they have given a lot of leeway to the president because he is an elected official, because he is a candidate in the 2020 and 2016 elections. They gave him a lot of leeway they would not have given to another account. And I think there were good arguments for that. Now, not all of their decisions of what content they left up do I agree with, but I agree with the basic idea that you don't want Facebook and Twitter just making that decision. That has changed because the argument they were making was based upon the idea that he was a Democratic actor, that the president was part of a democratic process and you want to give him free speech. The president has effectively rejected democratic action. And by calling for violence, he has stepped outside of the norms that he was expecting Facebook and Twitter to follow. So I do think it was the right move for them.
Some would argue, Alex, in recent years that Facebook and other social media companies have always been reactive to problems rather than proactive in preventing them. To what extent is there a wider issue that these platforms, because of their algorithms, because of the way they work, have accentuated polarization in society and accentuated the proliferation of inaccurate news or statements or videos, and that they need to do a lot more than just this and actually be proactive rather than reactive?
So there's two issues there. On the proactive reactive, I agree. And one of the problems has been that the companies have not publicly announced the red lines of that if somebody crossed them, such as the president, that they would enforce. And I think that's something that is going to have to change because the fact that they are making these decisions in reaction to the president's activity and to people on the other political side means that they're going to be a constant political football. And so they're going to have to change that. On the responsibility of the companies, however, we have to be really careful to be actually evidence-based. And there's a lot of very loose talk about algorithms and amplification that isn't backed by the actual empirical evidence. And so somebody like the president is a newsworthy figure. He has the entire Republican Party. He has Fox News and a huge media ecosystem. The things he says is going to be amplified massively. And so when it comes to the president himself, talking about algorithmic amplification, I don't think is actually that relevant. This is much more about the equities that we want to balance in a democracy and what are the responsibilities of the companies to respect the democratic process versus the responsibilities to take down speech that could possibly cause violence.
Did you see Chris Sacca's note, an investor who was an early investor in Twitter? I mean, he went really hard after these companies saying, for 4 years, you've rationalized this terror. Inciting violent treason is not a free speech exercise. If you work at those companies, it is on you too. Shut it down. How much responsibility do you think the companies themselves bear for allowing this speech, promoting this speech, allowing these groups, this mob to organize and to carry out something like what happened yesterday?
So they do have responsibility. I mean, the primary responsibility for the actions of these individuals are them. The primary responsibility for spreading election disinformation has been the president and the rest of the Republican Party, to be honest. Like with, Facebook and Twitter took an action on the president's accounts, but you had more than half of the Republican members of Congress vote to back his completely ridiculous and evidence-free claims about the election being stolen. So we're talking about a larger issue than just social media. Also, to be frank, the traditional media has a responsibility here. There's no corporation in the world that has done more to mainstream Donald Trump than the National Broadcasting Corporation of all companies. And so we got to be real careful about seeing him in the context of an overall media environment that he was able to manipulate as a showman, as a reality TV star, which then included his Twitter and Facebook personas, but not exclusively those. And there's a failure at many different levels at the tech companies, but honestly, there's a much larger failure within the Republican Party and a pretty big failure within the traditional media as well.
You're blaming NBC because of his prior TV show before he entered politics?
I am saying that, one, that
it was a
no
reality
organization...
TV show. It was meant
That's right.
to have those aspects.
And it is the reality TV show that convinced those people out who are going into the Capitol that he's a real billionaire, that he really speaks for them. And there's also the media, if you got to remember, I think back to 2015, 2016, during the time during which Donald Trump was seen as a sideshow by many, it was the media that lifted him up and covered him in a way that was not true for any of the 15 or 16 other candidates in the Republican primary. So he has been able to manipulate the way American media works, including social media. And there are a lot of different failures. I think there's a lot of kind of retroactive looks where people are overlooking their own responsibility here and saying, if Twitter and Facebook had just made him disappear, he would have disappeared. That's not true. That's not true in 2015, 2016. That's certainly not true about the lies he's been telling. And that is still being told on other networks. There's another television network that right now is partially justifying what happened yesterday and is continuing to tell lies about what happened during the election. And so we have a kind of a bigger issue of how do you deal with a person who has no connection to the truth in an environment where people generally balance both sides and that we give space to both sides, both online and in traditional media.
So ultimately, though, mainstream media ranks where relative to social media platforms whose very algorithms actually accentuate what people believe?
So I don't think there's an easy ranking here. And that's one of the things I'm trying to say is that all of these things play together. You have his ability to speak directly to people through social media. You also have massive amplification of his speech on television, in newspapers, and the like. You have those stories make it back to social media. It's a big, complex, dynamic environment for which none of these companies has total control. I think it's appropriate for the companies to take them down at this point. But just as the media has been dealing with the fact that the things the president of the United States says are newsworthy, there also is a really difficult balancing act of what power do we want Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey to have to decide who is a legitimate political actor. And Donald Trump is a really special case. He is an extreme case. After his presidency is over, which hopefully ends peacefully at this point, we're going to have to come back to kind of the idea of, for the next cycle, how are we not going to allow somebody to manipulate us this way? But I think it's just a little bit too pat and easy to say that Jack Dorsey could have just made Donald Trump disappear. I don't think there's any evidence that that's true. There is responsibility for these companies, but it is tied up the responsibility of lots of players.
Alex, thanks for joining us. That's certainly true, and I guess all eyes will be on lawmakers over the next year as well to tidy up the rules and whose responsibility that might all be. Alex Stamos, thanks for joining us. Straight ahead, Coca-Cola getting its 4th downgrade in 4 days. We'll speak to the analysts behind the latest call next in the Market Zone.
Guys, is this your new normal?
My problem is right in the middle. It's all right here.
Lose the weight with Nutrisystem for Men. Lose up to 13 pounds in your first month. Lose weight now. Money back guarantee.
I got to eat all of my favorite foods.
Make Nutrisystem for Men your new normal.
That's all I did. I ate the food, I lost the weight.
Act now and save 50% off a month of food and shakes.
Go online or call 877-959-FIT8 to save 50% on a month of food and shakes.
New projects means new project managers. You need to hire.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. The moment you sponsor a job on Indeed, you get a short list of quality candidates from a resume database. Claim your $75 credit when you post your first job at Indeed.com/home.
I'm not ready to lose my hair. Not now. But I never thought there was a real solution. Now I use Keeps, the easiest way to keep my hair. And I can get my treatment without leaving the couch. Go to Keeps.com to learn more.
Tonight, Ted Danson is Mr. Mayor.
You're not the mayor. I'm the mayor.
Well, let's just agree to disagree, shall we?
Mayor fight! Mayor fight!
Mr. Mayor premieres tonight on NBC.
We're excited to do business with you, but before we sign, I gotta ask.
Sure, anything.
We searched you online, and maybe you can explain this?
Can't believe that garbage is still coming in. That is so false.
Frustrated with your online search results? Call Reputation Defender today to join tens of thousands who've improved their online reputation. Get your free reputation report card at reputationdefender.com or call 1-877-866-8555.
Having trouble getting help for erectile dysfunction? Get help fast with Lemonade Health. Just answer a few questions. And they can send you medication so you can get better quickly. Visit lemonadehealth.com today.
Hi, I'm Hanno. I created Gabi because most people overpay on car insurance. Gabi is a free tool that saves you money by finding the best deal. Gabi users save more than $800 per year on average. Go to Gabi.com and stop overpaying for car insurance.
Payday. A big moment for your employees and a big moment for you. And it all happens thanks to the experts at Paychex. When it's time to add a new member to your team, the Paychex suite of next-generation HR solutions can handle it all for you. And when you want to get your employees the benefits they need, Paychex does that too. 50 years and thousands of experts in payroll, HR, benefits, and insurance. Sign up today for 1 month free at paychex.com/future.
Hi, I'm John Fiorentino, inventor of the Moon Pod, the most comfortable beanbag on the planet. The first beanbag was created in 1969, and it was just a clump of cheap foam stuffed inside of a shapeless cloth. So about 50 years later, I reinvented the beanbag. Moon Pod uses zero-gravity custom bead technology that instantly adapts to your individual body shape. With its 3 dynamic relaxation positions, Moon Pod is unlike anything you've ever felt before. So join us today and experience Moon Pod, the most comfortable place in the universe.
12 minutes left in the trading day. We are now in the closing bell market zone. Commercial-free coverage of all the action going into the close. CNBC senior markets commentator Mike Santoli here as always to break down these crucial moments of the trading day. And today we've got Stephanie Link from Hightower here as well. Welcome back, Stephanie. We'll kick it off with the broader market. We are now on record close watch for the Dow, the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, and the Russell 2000. Dow set to close above 31,000 for the first time ever, Steph. While so many around the world are sitting here with jaws dropped watching what played out in Washington, investors are buying, thinking ahead to stimulus and the end of the pandemic. What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, you hit it perfectly. I know yesterday was unsettling and very disturbing. What's going on in Washington is unsettling and disturbing in general, right? But I'm focused on kind of fundamentals, what I can, as an investor. And what I was encouraged about is that we have this certainty with regards to now Biden being the president. We have the certainty with Congress and the makeup of Congress. And it's a blue wave, and it was a surprise to be a blue wave. But now we know what we got. We're going to get higher taxes, but I don't think you're going to get higher taxes in the near term. And you hit on it perfectly. We're going to get more stimulus, and we're going to get infrastructure stimulus. And that's going to lead to better growth in GDP, and that's going to lead to better earnings growth, which is the most important. And we're actually off to a pretty good start this week in economic data. The ISM manufacturing beat, ISM services beat with new orders and exports, even initial claims down 3 weeks in a row. And also, if you look at Challenger Gray, the hiring intentions were up 193% year over year in the month of December. Those are really good and promising numbers. And I think all this stimulus is only going to lead to better data ahead. And it's also very encouraging to see the cyclical stocks participate. You know, I have been a big fan. I'm impressed with financials. I'm impressed with energy. Maybe they take a pause because they're both up huge on the year so far. But I still like that barbell approach of having cyclicals and also having some defensive growth.
And Mike, I guess today we're seeing that the big tech, expensive NASDAQ stocks are able to shrug off what has been quite a big move in yields over the last 2 days or so, suggesting that the rates are going to have to be a lot closer to 2% as opposed to just above 1% before that multiple compression argument comes in.
Right, and just sort of the bull market dynamics of just finding the next thing to buy that has been not quite participating in the last leg is also at work here. You know, forget about the big, you know, high cash flow earners of the NASDAQ, like the top 5 stocks. How about, you know, the ARK Innovation ETF being up more than 7% today? That shows you where the energy is. People are just sort of looking for the next big score. and it's not just about carefully valuing long-term growth based on Treasury yields. Even though, yes, at some level the Treasury yields theoretically should pinch the growth stock valuations.
Now, as Steph mentioned, banks are on an absolute tear yesterday, and adding to those gains again today. The KBW Banks Index was up nearly 7% at the close yesterday, not really pulling back in the afternoon despite the unrest in D.C., adding to those gains with a healthy 2.6% move today. They're now up about 40% over the past 3 months, during which time we've had positive vaccine developments, of course, which was good for cyclicals broadly. We've had a big vote of confidence for banks, strength overall, and share prices by the Fed allowing buybacks again. And we've had more fiscal stimulus delivered, with possibly more to come. The last 2 days in particular have been outsized moves higher for bank stocks because yields have jumped so much. The 10-year, as you can see on Wednesday and Thursday, moving from below 1% to 1.08 almost. The sector remains cheap relative to the S&P 500, but with such a strong recent 3-month run, focus now, of course, turns to earnings, which kick off next Friday. And Steph, you mentioned it briefly there, that 3-month performance, even though they're still cheap relative to certain sectors, does suggest that we need some pretty good earnings to come through over the next couple of quarters to drive similar returns we've seen in recent months.
Oh, absolutely. I don't really like the setup into the print. I mean, the big six up anywhere from 8 to 11% just this week alone, year to date. I mean, those are crazy, crazy moves. But if, to your point, we see a steeper yield curve, that will help earnings. That will help net interest margin. So I do think that you can own a basket. I own Bank of America for that yield curve trade, if you will. I own Morgan Stanley because they're diversifying their revenue stream. And I think Wells Fargo, my goodness, it's still down over 30%, right, from last year. So it's still very, I think, cheap, and it's a turnaround story. And I think the asset cap news to come in the future will be another catalyst for the shares.
Where's the sentiment on the banks, Mike? It was so negative and downbeat for a lot of last year. It feels like it's really starting to turn here with the price outperformance.
It's rounding toward positive. I think it takes a while, though, to turn that. If you looked at aggregate analyst sentiment, I actually think that the price targets are pretty muted. People are not as loud about it. And, I mean, to be honest, they've also kind of normalized on a valuation basis. Certainly Wells Fargo remains at a steep discount. But if you look at B of A or JP Morgan, they're kind of around their, 5-year average in terms of price-to-book valuations. Of course, if the economy improves and we're off to the races on yields, then, that's going to go higher. But I do think that it's sort of in the process of becoming popular, but maybe not overpopular yet.
Bitcoin back to 39K. Shares of Coca-Cola falling flat, down nearly 9% so far this week. 4 Wall Street firms downgrading the stock to neutral in as many days. JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank both citing tax concerns. Guggenheim expects beverage companies to take longer to recover this year, and RBC is taking a caffeine break, saying valuation is near full. Andrea Teixeira joins us now from JP Morgan. She downgraded the stock today. Thank you for joining us. I did some investigating, Andrea, about whether the company held a call with investors and analysts last week or something, why you guys all downgraded the stock. It doesn't sound like they did they? Why did this all happen? 4 downgrades in a row.
No, I think what has happened, thank you for having us and having me specific on this name. The decision was basically on the back of their announcement yesterday that they were hiring a judge, Judge Michael Luttig. I think that raised more questions about what has happened. And that was back in November 18 when they had an opinion, the IRS had an opinion regarding, and the tax court has had an opinion regarding this matter that goes back to 2007 to 2009, and that's about $3.3 billion that they were deemed at, as an opinion. It can be appealed, and I believe that Coke will appeal to that, but that becomes an overhang for the stock, and that's what I think, investors should be worried about, not so much in retroactive terms, but also what the future can bring, if that would mean that eventually they would have to raise and close these potential tax loopholes.
What about the sentiment around staples as well? It feels like investors right now really want reopening trades. They want to be tied to the vaccine plays. and value trades. That's what's popular. Where does that leave consumer staples and overall sentiment toward the group?
Yeah, definitely, Sarah. I think that relative to the higher growth names, definitely Staples, and that's a house view that JP Morgan has, that Staples should relatively underperform in the reopening trade. Specifically on Coke, there's still a reopening trade there, but I think that in general, Staples should underperform in a scenario of recovery.
Steph, are you still a holder of Coke?
I am a holder of Coke, and I do think this tax issue will be an overhang in the short term, but I'm still focusing on fundamentals. I mean, Sarah hit it. It's down 9% in 4 days. It's now yielding 3.3%. And it is a reopened stock. 40% of their revenues are derived from on-premise, and 10% are gas and convenience stores. So as we reopen, they should actually do better. They've been doing a great, the CEO is great. They've been doing a great job in terms of streamlining their products, for sure. And they're gaining market share. They have pricing power, and they are doing an amazing job on operating margins and cost controls. Operating margins last quarter were up 230 basis points. That is very, very impressive. So I think they can get back to that 8% organic growth rate. And I love the setup into earnings because expectations are super low here.
Andrea, it was always considered Coke was the away-from-home play, and Pepsi was the at-home play, which is why it was outperforming during the pandemic, because it had the snacks and people were buying snacks at home. Is that still the case? Because I noticed Pepsi has gotten a few downgrades of its own this week.
Yeah, no, I think what Stephanie had said, it's right on, and that's the reason why we still like it long-term and fundamentally. Coke and Pepsi, I think Coke obviously has a bigger portion, as Stephanie correctly pointed out, is about 50% in total exposure to on-premises. The difference between Pepsi and Coke is that I don't think that Pepsi will have that overhang in the tax front, and it's less, Pepsi has less exposure to on-premises, about 17-ish, 15-ish%. So there will be less of a benefit there, but by the same token, it's a pretty defensive name, and it's also like an accretive name on earnings. So I think that Pepsi relatively is a better stock here into the print. We have an overweight rating on Pepsi.
Got it. Andrea, thank you very much for joining us with your downgrade call today from JP Morgan. You're at the 2-minute warning sign. 2 minutes to go in the trading day. Mike, what are you seeing in the internals?
Yeah, it's pretty broad rally. You just look at the up-down volume of the New York Stock Exchange, not quite 3-to-1, so it's certainly strong, although maybe the indexes themselves overstate the strength just because of the mega cap upside we've gotten today. Look at bonds, high-yield ETF versus the investment-grade corporate ETF, HYG against LQD. LQD is trading with Treasury, so the price of those bonds are down. The yields are somewhat up, but high-yield trading much more with equities, holding up fine, so credit is looking like it's supportive of this equity rally. VIX is down almost like 2 or 3 points today. So it's taking away some of that uncertainty perhaps around the Electoral College, and then we'll see if it bleeds below 20 after January 20th. Will.
We've got, 45 seconds left to go. We're set for record closes on the Dow and the S&P, though not quite for the NASDAQ, which is leading the charge, though, in terms of intraday. Sorry, the NASDAQ also set for a record close as well, up 2.6%, 1.5% for the S&P, the Dow up 0.7%. Tech and consumer discretionary, the best performing sectors. Utilities, the worst performer. We have got a decent little bit in the dollar today, only up 1/3%, but higher. Oil's up 0.7%. Gold up 1/3% today. Bitcoin only up 8%, having been above 40K, is around 39.6K. Extraordinary ongoing run for Bitcoin. At the bell, Sarah, 1.5% of gains for the S&P 500 and a record close.
A quadruple record, as we like to say. NASDAQ above 13,000, Dow above 31,000. Wow. Welcome back, everyone, to Closing Bell. If you are just joining us, I'm Sarah Eisen with Wilfred Frost and Mike Santoli, CNBC senior markets commentator. Take a look at how we finished up the day on Wall Street. Stocks continue to surge. The Dow closing up 211 points at a record high above 31,000 for the first time ever. Walgreens, Apple, and JP Morgan powering the Dow higher. 3M, Coke, and P&G lag. S&P 500 up 1.5%. Technology was the star today. Consumer discretionary, energy, communication services. So kind of a mix of the cyclical value stocks and also technology, utilities, and staples were the losing sectors. There's the NASDAQ, big winner of all four, up 2.5%. Technology made a big comeback today Names like Tesla and Apple and Amazon all higher. The Russell 2000 index of small caps hitting its own record high, up 1.9%. We are now back in the black for the week, erasing Monday's big sell-off. We are also just minutes away from Micron earnings. We're going to break those numbers as soon as they cross, see if it says anything about where we are in the cycle. Plus, the CEO of Aurora Cannabis is here to weigh in on what the incoming Biden administration could mean for the legalization of pot, specifically with Democrats holding the majority in the Senate. Let's talk markets, though. Stephanie Ling from Hightower still with us. Tom Lee from Fundstrat Global Advisors joins the conversation. Welcome, Tom. First to you, Mike, on this record-setting day where, again, so many of us are wondering with questions out there like, what is the future of democracy and the two-party system, and what do the next 13 days look like until inauguration? Investors aren't asking questions. They're just buying.
Yeah, it'll take it takes just a second.
No, I mean, honestly, Sarah, it's basically investors are playing offense coming into this year. Nothing that's gone on so far in D.C. has undermined the premise we're getting a transition. The system more or less went with a lot of hiccups yesterday, as expected, and it's willing to set aside, the market is, some of these unsettling issues because it's getting enough reinforcement about the upbeat case for an economic acceleration. The services sector number today, for example, was good. We'll see what the jobs number has tomorrow. At the same time, I think people are just grabbing for risk. And so it's, yes, the economically sensitive stuff moving, the small caps, the industrials, the banks, treasury yields going up. That all makes sense in terms of an economic story. The rest of it, though, Bitcoin flying, Tesla flying every single day for no reason. They're almost pure abstractions of just asset momentum at this point. I think both those things happening at once. It's starting to run a little hot again on that front.
Tom Lee, where do you stand on things running a little too hot in the short term, both the Bitcoins of this world and the S&P 500?
I mean, I would be in the camp that I think there's still room for a lot more upside, potentially explosive. And that has a lot to do with the level of fear. The VIX last year averaged almost 30 for the full year. That's the third highest level in history. And the only two times it was higher was 2009, 2010. And in the year where visibility returns, the VIX should actually make a pretty big dive. I mean, maybe something to as low as 15 this year. And I think that's going to take scared money off the sidelines. And we know in the last 10 years, 94% of all inflows went into bonds. Very little went into equities. So if we get some capital flying into stocks, I think stocks could make a really big move in the next couple weeks.
Which part of the market? What kinds of stocks, Tom? Because today it was technology and mega cap growth names, the FANG names, back on top. Yesterday it was a lot of the value trades, and it seems to alternate here. Today it was a little bit of everything. But where are you looking?
I mean, I think if we look at just the first few days of this year, the leadership has come from things like energy and the cyclicals, including financials and industrials, or even discretionary, excluding Amazon. I actually think that's kind of a precursor to what the full year should look like. As Stephanie mentioned, the ISMs have really strengthened, and we have a lot more visibility out of Washington. And given how much fear and cash has been sitting on the sidelines, I think people might be willing to put money into cyclicals. So I think it's going to be cyclical.
So, Steph, do you feel like whether it's the cyclicals specifically or the broader market as a whole have already now priced in the extra potential stimulus to come from the new administration?
It's a tough question to answer. And by the way, I hope, Tom, you're right on the cyclicals, because I am definitely tilted big time to the cyclicals. But I just think that people don't expect to see the better growth this year. S&P earnings by the street is expected to be up 21% this year. What if we do 30? What if we do 35? And the reason I say that is because we have the certainty, we're getting more certainty. If you have the top line, the growth, if you have better GDP and you have strong margins, you have huge operating leverage. And that's why the cyclicals actually will outperform kind of secular growth, if you will. And so that's why I want to have exposure. Some of these stocks are still down a lot. Wilf, we just talked about. Wells Fargo's down. I mean, Bank of America's down. All some of the financials, most of them are still down, right, from last year. So I think there's upside there. I don't think anybody really is overweight on the industrial side just yet. I think they're actually in those, what you call the higher quality industrials. And I think some of the real, like leveraged names with a lot of beta are interesting here as well. And then, of course, energy. I think we all got fed up with energy over the last several years, and we're all wondering if this is real. I know for me, I've been adding on the energy side in Chevron and Schlumberger. That's probably where I'm going to keep it at this point, but I think that Tom is going to be right. I hope he is, but that's the way I'm positioned.
Speaking of wondering whether this is real, how about Bitcoin prices, Tom Lee? Now back trading just around 40,000, hitting 40,000. You've become a real hero in the Bitcoin community as someone who's put some bullish price targets. How do you make a price target for Bitcoin, and how do you explain the action we're seeing in recent days?
Well, you have to keep in mind Bitcoin is pretty unique because as a blockchain, it is one of the most secure in the world, and it's also a network value asset, meaning it really benefits from additional holders. So similar to how Facebook and other networks have exponential rise in value because of the increase in users. And I think the usefulness of Bitcoin really proved itself last year. I mean, we had a lot of disruption globally, and I think people wanted to find something that was sort of sound money, and that was Bitcoin. But interestingly, 2021 is the year that's after a halvening. That's a lot like 2017. So as good as 2020 was, which was a lot like 2016, 2017 was the year that we saw a parabolic move in Bitcoin. So I think Bitcoin could be up more than 300% this year. And I think, again, it's an early sign, but already the first few days of this year, it does show that there's still a lot of appetite and inflows into Bitcoin. And of course, I think it's becoming a little more institutionally credible.
What about the risk of regulation? Is that something that you consider would be derailing of that 300% view for this year? And is Janet Yellen the type of Treasury Secretary with her background that might want to clamp down on it?
Well, regulation can be good or bad. If there's regulation that's a desire to try to obliterate the existence of blockchains, that would be bad. But as you know, I think that governments are more interested in making sure people don't avoid paying taxes. And so whether it's the issues around self-custody wallets, I think these are constructive and important things. And in fact, it would really help strengthen its institutional case. And of course, as you know, some corporates are considering using Bitcoin as a substitute for bonds in their treasury. I think that's, I think that could be quite wise for a business, but of course, they just have to worry about the operational security issues around custody of Bitcoin.
We've got some earnings out, Micron numbers crossing. Josh Lipton's got them for us. Josh.
So, Wilf, Micron is reporting Q1 EPS here of 78 cents versus expectations of 71 cents. Revenue is also beat $5.77 billion. The street was at $5.73 billion. For Q2, they're looking for 75 cents plus or minus 7 cents. Analysts were at 63 cents there, and they're calling for revenue of about $5.8 billion in Q2. Analysts were at $5.5 billion. Comments here from CEO Sanjay Mehrotra saying that Micron is simultaneously leading on DRAM and NAND technologies. Says they're in an excellent position to benefit from accelerating digital transformation of the global economy, fueled, he says, by AI, 5G, cloud, and the intelligent edge. Remember, heading into this report, this stock had been a rocket ship, up about 60% in the past 3 months alone. Conference calls at 4:30 Eastern. Back to you all.
Josh, thanks so much for that. Steph, is this the type of thing you're kind of alluding to about how earnings can come through pretty positively over the next couple of months?
Yeah, I mean, I think this looks like a really good report, and the stock is up 40% in the last 2 months alone, and we had an upgrade earlier this week, so expectations were really high, so I'm happy to see it green. We'll see where it all settles out, but that is because DRAM is just beginning to see its recovery, and Micron has 68% exposure to DRAM, and we have a really big supply-demand imbalance, the worst actually since 2017, so these are the kinds of stories I like. I don't own Micron, I own Lam Research. It's going to also benefit from DRAM and NAND recovery, but you pick your spots, you pick your companies of what you like, and I think you definitely want to have exposure, though, to this particular theme.
Up 2% after hours on top of an already strong run into earnings. Let's get the latest now from Washington. Kayla Tausche is there for us now. And Kayla, the growing calls to remove President Trump from office. What can you tell us?
Well, there is a tidal wave of news here in D.C., Sarah, from lots of resignations from inside the Trump administration and questions about whether or how there would be enough of a movement to remove President Trump via the 25th Amendment or through the impeachment process. Certainly, there have been the most calls from Democrats on that front, although there are some rumblings from within the administration that some of those options are being explored. As far as the work to bring to justice the individuals who stormed the Capitol yesterday, a press conference just wrapped up a few minutes ago from the Office of the U.S. Attorney of the District of Columbia, where they talked about the fact that there are charges being brought. 40 individuals have been charged in the last 36 hours. The majority of those charges relating to the unlawful entry into the Capitol, but there are also charges for assault and possession of firearms. And there was one individual, according to the acting U.S. Attorney Michael Sherwin, who possessed semi-automatic rifles and 11 Molotov cocktails. They said that there are going to be some more information about that individual filed later this evening, and 15 federal cases presented to a judge later today. So certainly law enforcement officials are trying to put some identities on the people who were at the Capitol yesterday and have started identifying some of the perpetrators in yesterday's siege. Sarah and Wilf.
Kayla Tausche, thank you for the update. Tom Lee, I don't know if you heard our interview last hour with Nelson Peltz, who's been in this market a long time, has had a lot of success, said he was absolutely shocked to see the action today and yesterday in the markets, the buying, despite the scenes we were all saying. He says it's either a sign of great hope or of rampant inflation. How do you interpret it?
I mean, I'd say that a third reason to explain it is there's a lot of money on the sidelines. I know people say they think everyone's ebullient and bullish, but when we speak to our clients, and you know, we touch nearly, I think, close to 40,000 institutional money managers every week, we find the vast majority are still cautious or negative. So I think, you know, yesterday you know, it was shocking what happened in Washington, but the market was able to see through this because, number one, I don't think anyone felt that this was going to affect the transition of power to Biden. And more importantly, I think this was an excuse for people to put money, which has been sitting on the sidelines, into the market. They were hoping probably for a bigger pullback. So I think the VIX is still your best indicator for how much fear is out there, and it's still quite elevated.
Tom, just quickly to round things off, S&P is just above 3,800. What's that short-term, 1-month target which you think we could rush up to?
Well, there's a couple levels I think that are important. You know, one is from my friend Tom DeMark, who thinks we make a run to 3,900 on the S&P, but what's more sort of consistent with our bottoms-up work and maybe a move below in the VIX would be something towards 4,000. So I think around 4,000, 3,900 to 4,000 is when I would start to look for a drawdown to start, and that would be something pretty painful, you know, towards 3,500.
Okay, Tom Lee, thanks so much for that. And thanks also to Stephanie Link for joining us, as always, on a Thursday. Straight ahead, pot stocks got a boost after the Democratic sweep in the Georgia runoff. Up next, we'll talk to the CEO of Aurora Cannabis about what the new Senate makeup could mean for marijuana legalization. We're back in 90 seconds.
At Southern New Hampshire University, we're committed to making college more accessible by making it more affordable. That's why we're keeping our tuition the same through the year 2021.
I knew SNHU was the place for me when I saw how affordable it was. I ran to my husband with my computer and I said, look, we can do this.
Take advantage of some of the lowest online tuition rates in the nation. Find your degree at snhu.edu.
Okay. Bounced a trade idea off my firm. Same old lines. I mean, show me some technical indicators, proprietary research, something.
That's why I like Schwab. They help look out for your blind spots.
Come on, Johnny, you got this, buddy.
Speaking of blind spots.
It's time to trade up. Schwab helps you see the full picture with powerful intel and trading specialists who get it. Plus, get commission-free online stock, ETF, and options trades. Schwab, the better place for traders.
America, break free from 2020. It's the last day to join Planet Fitness for no enrollment. $10 a month, no commitment. 2020 is over. Start 2021 with tons of ways to get moving in our clean and spacious clubs. And spread out while you work out with cardio distancing and our new crowd meter. Plus, use our app to get moving anywhere. Your fitness is essential, so kick things off with the year's best deal. Join for no enrollment, $10 a month, no commitment. Hurry, deal ends today.
Welcome back. Pot stocks are red hot this week. Names like Aurora, Canopy Growth, and Tilray all up double digits over the course of the week. This comes as Democrats won control of the Senate. Joining us now in an exclusive interview is Aurora Cannabis CEO Miguel Martin. Very good afternoon to you, Miguel. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
What is your expectation in the year ahead in terms of rule changes, legal changes in your industry? Do you think you'll get something federal, or is this a case of hoping that more states legalize it?
Oh, well, it's a great question. I think it's sort of both. You know, prior to the Democrats taking over in the Senate, I would have told you the States Act probably had a greater likelihood. But now with the Democrats, I think the MORE Act, which really opens up interstate commerce, obviously, has a greater likelihood. So we're bullish on that. But your comment on the states one is a very astute one. You know, we're really getting to the tipping point. We had 5 states pass comprehensive legislation on cannabis. Obviously, Governor Cuomo in New York has made some recent announcements. And so we're very close to that tipping point where you have enough economics, enough states that we're going to see momentum. And I think that's consistent with also what we're seeing globally, in key markets for us like Israel and Western Europe.
Well, I was going to move on to that in terms of international markets. I guess large parts of Western Europe still a long way behind the situation in the U.S. What is your outlook on a 2-year view for Europe?
Pretty bullish. I mean, if you look at what's happening in the EU, we just had a great tender in the Netherlands. If you look at the Israeli market, where we have a wonderful partnership and had some great success in the fourth quarter of this year, we're definitely seeing, progress. Many of those countries, are taking a compliance and science-based approach, and we're only 2 years into the Canadian experience. And so there's been a lot of sharing, a lot of focus on the science and compliance aspects, particularly on the medical side. And companies like Aurora that have made significant investments in that and have definitely taken a compliance-first approach are seeing advantages in key markets such as Germany.
I think the question for investors, Miguel, is how Aurora is positioned if we do start to see legislative changes in the U.S., in New York, or potentially federally in this country. Your stock was, almost a $200 stock a few years ago. It's now trading at $12. So what's happened here? How are you going to make money and position yourself for when these changes do come?
Well, I mean, listen, there's no question there's been a massive reset in the cannabis companies. If you look at how they were valued, look at what everyone expected, it's dramatically different. And our company has had a tremendous transformation. SG&A down from 100 million to low 40 million and a quarter. I've done a lot of strong work on right-sizing production. And the reality is we're focused on making money. And I think you'll see that in the upcoming quarters. When investors look at, companies like ours and they think about something like the U.S., what I would encourage them to think about is what are the assets that companies like Aurora have around genetics, IP, trademarks, science. Those really are the core assets that are portable. And if you think about the U.S. today, the MSOs operate in a state-by-state market. There's no question that the FDA, which is very close to Health Canada, will enact a structure that will look a lot like the Canadian environment. And it's companies like Aurora that have been successful. We are the #1 medical company in Canada that will do exceptionally well in the U.S. because we're the only, companies like that have had that experience.
But I guess what I'm wondering really, just to get to the heart of it, Miguel, is if you need a partner to enter the U.S. market. We just saw that this big merger with Aphria and Tilray. We talked to Irwin Simon about it. And that's a big bet on the U.S. Do you need to do that sort of consolidation as well?
I don't think so. I mean, if you look at, us going into other markets, we haven't needed a partner. I understand the U.S. is a bit different. If we need a partner, we'll be in a position to be able to do it. I think what is important is that the assets that Aurora have will be incredibly attractive, whether that's through a partnership and getting more value through that partnership, whether that's through M&A, where we get more value because of our experience, or in a lot of different ways. I mean, there's a lot of ways to monetize the Canadian experience, whether that's IP, genetics, trademarks, brands, compliance. And so we'll be in a great position. The other comment I'll make is we have the #1 ranked CBD business in the U.S. with over 23,000 stores. So while there's a lot of talk about THC, the non-THC bearing cannabinoids will have tremendous economics when the FDA gets through their science-based process. So I think we're well positioned regardless of how the U.S. heads up.
Miguel, thanks so much for joining us. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much for having us. We appreciate it.
We have some breaking news on Boeing. Phil LeBeau's got it for us. Hi, Phil.
Hey, Wilf, Boeing has entered into a deferred prosecution agreement regarding the 737 MAX investigation. This is with the U.S. Department of Justice. Remember, we've known for some time that the DOJ was investigating Boeing regarding the MAX, regarding the certification. As part of this agreement, which is, by the way, what many people on Wall Street expected, Boeing has agreed to pay more than $2.5 billion. There are a couple of terms within there in terms of things that Boeing has to meet on the compliance side. Also, as part of this charge will be essentially dismissed after 3 years if Boeing meets all of the stipulations in this agreement. But again, this is a deferred prosecution agreement between Boeing and the DOJ regarding the 737 MAX certification process. This essentially ends the criminal investigation, if you will, by the DOJ looking into what Boeing did or did not do in the case of the certification process. And again, they are agreeing to pay $2.5 billion. Guys, back to you.
So does that also, Phil, end any potential threats to any individual executives at Boeing?
Apparently, we do not see any criminal charges filed against individuals as part of this complaint. Now, theoretically, and when we have to read through all of this, they may say, hey, look, there may be a specific individual who may be charged separately, but there is no indication of any individual charges that will be pursued by the DOJ.
Okay, Phil LeBeau, thanks so much for that. Boeing moving about just under 1% after hours. American households have been building up big cash piles over the last year. Up next, Mike Santoli looks at why that could give the consumer economy a big boost in 2021. As a reminder, you can always watch or listen to us live on the go on the CNBC app. We'll be right back.
The market is full of disruption, but a strategic investing approach can prepare you for what's ahead and give you the confidence to harness opportunity and manage risk. What should be top of mind for financial advisors?
Investing in what feels good oftentimes isn't the best recipe for longer-term investment success.
The hunt for yield and income really is the broad theme.
Go beyond disruption to invest in opportunity with T. Rowe Price.
Mr. Wonderful here. It's hard for everyday people to get access to startup investments. But with Start Engine, you can choose between hundreds of startups to build your portfolio. It's your turn to become a shark. Visit startengine.com today.
We're excited to do business with you, but before we sign, I gotta ask.
Sure, anything.
We searched you online, and maybe you can explain this?
Can't believe that garbage is still coming in. That is so false.
Frustrated with your online search results? Call Reputation Defender today to join tens of thousands who've improved their online reputation. Get your free reputation report card at reputationdefender.com or call 1-877-866-8555.
Having trouble getting help for erectile dysfunction? Get help fast with Lemonade Health. Just answer a few questions. And they can send you medication so you can get better quickly. Visit lemonadehealth.com today.
Hey, I'm Nick. We created Gabi because most people overpay for car insurance. Gabi is a free tool that saves you money by finding the best deal. Gabi saves users over $800 a year on average. Go to Gabi.com and stop overpaying for car insurance.
Tonight, the growing calls for the president to be removed, plus the search for those who attacked the Capitol, and the security fears for the inauguration just days away.
The facts, the truth, the news with Shepard Smith, 7 Eastern, CNBC.
Let's send it over to Mike Santoli for a look at household finances amid talk of potential further stimulus from Washington. Mike.
Yeah, well, if a lot of talk of stimulus, that's sort of part of the bull case for consumer spending in the coming year. But there really is a lot of cash sloshing around already in aggregate in consumer accounts. So this is all checkable deposits. It's mostly retail. It's mostly bank accounts, also some money market funds. You see the normal trend would have taken you about $2.5 trillion. So there's some $1.5 trillion in excess. It's not all consumers. Some of it is corporate money markets, but just, enough to be said that there's been a buildup of savings out there in aggregate. Again, there's a lot of folks without work that don't have the savings, but overall it looks okay. Take a look at household debt burdens right now. Pretty much as low as they've been, at least in 30 years or something like that. People have paid down a lot of credit cards, haven't been able to take out more loans, perhaps. And this shows you with rates at this level, there's a lot of latent spending power and leverage power in the consumer economy right now, Sarah.
Yeah, one reason a lot of people are bullish on the consumer this year. Mike, thanks. Frozen food, it's red hot for Conagra. Up next, the company's CEO on how the changing taste of consumers for frozen food is driving sales growth right now. We'll be right back.
Years ago, we founded Loan Depot because we were confident we could deliver the American dream of home ownership to individuals and families across the nation. At Loan Depot, we know home means everything.
Your grooming business is booming. You need to hire.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. The moment you sponsor a job on Indeed, you get a short list of quality candidates from our resume database. Claim your $75 credit when you post your first job at Indeed.com/groomer.
I have a really demanding job, and HelloFresh really changed my life. It saves me time and money. I don't have to go to the grocery store. It comes straight to my door, and it's there when I'm ready to cook.
Hit refresh with HelloFresh. Use code TV10 for 10 free meals, including free shipping.
Mr. Wonderful here. It's hard for everyday people to get access to startup investments. But with Start Engine, you can choose between hundreds of startups to build your portfolio. It's your turn to become a shark. Visit startengine.com today.
3 meetings and 3 stops today. There's just never enough time. If you've ever considered flying private jets, you have to check out OneFlight's badge. The badge makes searching and booking private jets as simple as booking a hotel. Just type in your location and find the closest airport. Then choose from over 4,000 jets in one place. When I land, there's always a car waiting for me, courtesy of OneFlight. What's your time worth? Badging.
MoonPod, a breakthrough in relaxation that's quickly becoming the world's most popular beanbag. Our custom zero-gravity bead technology acts as your personalized cushioning system. MoonPod is the most comfortable place in the universe. Try yours today at moonpod.co.
Frozen food may be heating up, but Conagra shares are cooling off. At least today, they closed down 5.5%. The company reporting Q2 earnings this morning, noting an 8% growth in sales from last year. That, of course, being driven by people continuing to eat at home during the pandemic. And the food giant forecasts comparable store sales to grow between 6 to 8% in the current quarter. Joining us now by phone for an exclusive interview is Conagra CEO Sean Connolly. Sean, it's good to talk to you again. You and other packaged food companies are putting up these tremendous quarters of growth and forecasting more growth, and the market is just not convinced it's going to last. What do you make of the share price reaction today?
Well, obviously, I don't love it when we put up a great quarter and the stock drops, but frankly, I'm focused on maximizing long-term value creation versus daily movements, and it was an excellent quarter. As you point out, we had broad-based strength and excellent fundamentals, and our consumers in frozen and elsewhere have discovered the massive innovation infusion we've launched over the past few years, and they're coming back again and again, which clearly bodes well post-COVID. But you make the good point, food stocks have not been up, even when posting strong numbers, and the market is clearly demonstrating a bit of a wait-and-see attitude toward food stocks right now. What I keep pointing out, though, is not just the absolute strength we're seeing, but the relative strength. We think that's the critical leading indicator as to who will emerge stronger.
So expand on that a little bit and try to make the case for why you see staying power in the consumer behavior changes around eating that we've seen, say buying frozen foods, that why when the vaccine comes and we hopefully all get back to normal, we won't resume normal eating habits, which is ditching a lot of the kind of old school brands that you and others have.
Well, it's an interesting question, and certainly a lot of companies have had a bit of an automatic tailwind because of COVID. But I'll point out that not all companies are performing with equal strength in trial, in repeat, and in depth of repeat. And we didn't just show up at COVID with a slate of old products. We've been transforming our portfolio for 5 years now. It has been a massive innovation overhaul. And frozen, as an example, one of the things we're experiencing within COVID is all these consumers who had an antiquated mental model of what frozen food is, they're now discovering that the frozen food quality they can get today is outstanding. It's essentially fresh food / frozen, but it's on call and ready when they are, and it's a great value. So it's excellent food, excellent value, and they're buying it again and again, and they're telling us, geez, this is not what I thought I was going to experience when I bought frozen. And we're seeing similar dynamics, but I'll point out an interesting fact, which is the last time there was a significant adverse macro environment in the 2008 crash, we saw sustained at-home eating occasions, but when we saw the pandemic hit, we saw a larger shift to at-home eating occasions, and we see no reason why some of that won't sustain, because basically the way to think about it is we believe we are experiencing an acceleration of product trial that in normal times would take years and hundreds of millions of dollars. And we have the portfolio that has been pleasing our consumers, and we're seeing them come back again and again.
How much do you need to spend then on marketing to sustain that? Are you getting this all for free because people are not being forced to experience your products, but I guess being pushed towards them somewhat? And how lasting an impact do you think you get, particularly on new consumers that might not be being reminded of your brands, but be trying them for the first time?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And one of the strange things is around our company, we're often focused on how do we generate more demand. And in the past 9 months, our focus has been how do we generate more supply. And in some cases, it hasn't made sense to invest marketing because we were simply out of capacity and our supply was that constrained because demand was so elevated. But we've built back some of our capacity. Our inventory levels are strong, and our marketing investments have been opportunistic where we have capacity, where we see strong ROI. So as an example, one of our very modern brands is Gardein. It fits this whole new plant-based lifestyle. We've been advertising Gardein. We've seen a tremendous response. Our frozen business is growing strongly overall, but within frozen, Gardein is leading the pack. And that's really a trend that we jumped on and we got behind to help maximize it. Because there's a lifetime value to the consumers that we capture today, given the repeat rates we're putting up.
What about Duncan Hines, Sean? How big of a growth driver is that with the at-home baking trend? And how are you capitalizing on that trend to make it more lasting?
Well, you all just talked about all the money that's sitting around in the savings, but what we see is people have been investing in their homes. They're expecting to have home offices going forward. They've been investing in their kitchens. They've been investing in their appliances. And amazingly, one of our strongest categories has been the baking category. And, moms and dads everywhere are seeing their sons and daughters learn how to bake, and they're cooking up a storm in the kitchen with products like Duncan Hines. So that is an example of the kind of product that you see growth in when consumers go into more of a nesting mode. And so whether it's Duncan Hines or products like our Rotel tomato business, people are looking for simple meals, whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, or dessert. And these kinds of products are meeting that need right now. And for many of these younger consumers, they're experiencing the art of cooking for the first time, and they're liking it.
I don't know. I'm kind of sick of the at-home baking thing. But finally, Sean, I wanted to ask you about groceries and what this industry is going to look like, say, in the next 10 years. Online ordering has really accelerated during this pandemic, along with online everything else. How do you see it playing out? Is it going to be third parties like Instacart, or are the companies like Walmart and Kroger going to go at it alone? And how big of a chunk of sales is it going to be, say, in 10 years?
It's going to be huge. It's already significant. You know, we've had several of our last quarters, we've been up over 100% in our e-commerce business. It's been a real focal point in our marketing investments. I made a point on the call today that you've got to market to consumers where they are. And if you think about where consumers are these days, they're on their devices, and they might be seeking information, seeking entertainment, or shopping. So we reach them there, and then those orders increasingly are becoming fulfilled from there and being delivered directly to consumers' home or curbside pickup. I don't see that that trend changing, and it's really all of our customers are involved in it. Pure blood e-tailers as well as traditional bricks and mortar retailers. We're going to be partnering with all of them to make sure that we keep up with the consumer trend.
Sean, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
The National Association of Manufacturers suggesting President Trump should be removed from office after yesterday's Capitol Hill riots. Coming up, we will ask the head of the National Retail Federation if he agrees.
If you're thinking about going to school online, Southern New Hampshire University is where you belong. We've been online for more than 25 years and have helped thousands of students reach their goals. As a nonprofit university, we believe access to high-quality education should be available to everyone. That's why we offer some of the lowest tuition rates in the nation and haven't raised tuition in nearly a decade. So no matter where you want to go, SNHU can help you get there. Visit snhu.edu today.
Blunders, they're how we learn. But investment blunders are a costly lesson that can hurt your retirement. Decisions like trying to time the market, placing big bets on a single stock, or letting politics and elections influence your investments. Fisher Investments has gathered the 13 worst blunders and how to avoid them in this eye-opening free guide.
Why take a chance? Let Fisher Investments send you our free guide, 13 retirement investment blunders to avoid, like running short of money in retirement, or working with a money manager who's not a fiduciary. Call now, 1-800-208-4466.
Fisher Investments has helped thousands avoid costly blunders and achieve a comfortable retirement. If you have $500,000 or more to invest, call now.
Call Fisher Investments now for your free guide, 1-800-208-4466.
Don't just retire. Retire well.
Tonight, Ted Danson is Mr. Mayor.
You're not the mayor. I'm the mayor.
Well, let's just agree to disagree, shall we?
Mayor fight! Mayor fight!
Mr. Mayor premieres tonight on NBC.
No more waiting. This year is going to be different. I'm going to seize the day. I want to stop bottling up my feelings and express myself. This year, I want to spend more time with those who matter most and build my support network. My New Year's resolution, get happy.
Hi.
We're excited to do business with you, but before we sign, I gotta ask.
Sure, anything.
We searched you online, and maybe you can explain this?
Can't believe that garbage is still coming in. That is so false.
Frustrated with your online search results? Call Reputation Defender today to join tens of thousands who've improved their online reputation. Get your free reputation report card at reputationdefender.com or call 1-877-866-8555.
Welcome back. Time for a CNBC News update with Sue Herrera. Hi, Sue.
Hello, Wilf. Hello, everybody. Here's what's happening at this hour. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she is joining Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer's call for President Trump's immediate removal from office. She says if Vice President Pence won't invoke the 25th Amendment, Congress may be prepared to move forward with impeachment for inciting a pro-Trump crowd to storm the Capitol building.
In calling for this seditious act, the President has committed an unspeakable assault on our nation and our people.
As he said, the Justice Department will consider bringing charges against anyone playing a role in the Capitol riot. The acting U.S. attorney in the District of Columbia today refused to rule out indicting President Trump for encouraging his followers at a rally to march to the Capitol. And in sports news, in a move made possible by new owner Steve Cohen's willingness to spend a lot of money, the New York Mets have traded for Cleveland's all-star shortstop Francisco Lindor, one of baseball's best players. Lindor is eligible to be a free agent after the upcoming season and will no doubt be demanding top dollar to sign a long-term contract. Good news for Mets fans. Sarah, you're up to date. Back to you.
Sue, thank you. Up next, the head of the National Retail Federation on how businesses are reacting to the Capitol Hill riots yesterday and what it all means for the economy. We'll be right back.
CNBC News Update is sponsored by Comcast Business. Bounce forward at ComcastBusiness.com.
You came to slay this Peloton. Get a little savage with it.
They can't stop you. They can't break you.
I know it hurts. You're almost there. Say it with me. I crushed that.
At-home motivation, anytime you want it.
Hi, Mr. Wonderful here. I believe that startup investing is key to building wealth, but it's hard for everyday people to find access to these deals. Well, I've got good news. On Start Engine, you can discover hundreds of startups raising capital and begin building your portfolio today. For as little as $100, you can own a piece of the next great business. It's your turn to become a shark. Join me at startengine.com.
Good morning, everybody. How you doing?
Here's a hint about how to make working from home less stressful and more comfortable. Make the switch to X-Chair. No matter where you put the amazing X-Chair, it instantly becomes the most comfortable place in any space. Infinite side-float recline and dynamic variable lumbar support make the X-Chair a customer favorite at home and work. Don't forget, the X-Chair lets you customize for the same measure of amazing comfort no matter what your size. Join the thousands of others who've discovered the joy of relaxing workdays. Now we've integrated penetrating heat and massage into our patented dynamic variable lumbar support. Once someone experiences our XHMT heat and massage chair, it's almost impossible to get them out of it. But don't worry, you don't have to share because there's an X-Chair for everyone. And you can get $100 off any model on our website. Your new normal? Incredibly comfortable. Call or click to order today and receive a 30-day risk-free trial and $100 off.
You'd like to sell your home now, but is that possible? Can the process be safe? Fortunately, the answer to these questions is yes. A MoveSafe certified agent from HomeLight has proven to sell homes fast, at a great price, and is certified to keeping your family safe. From things like providing virtual showings, digital closings, and following the most current health guidelines. Is your real estate agent MoveSafe certified? Find out today at HomeLight.com.
Business leaders and industry groups calling out and condemning the actions of pro-Trump rioters who stormed the Capitol yesterday. The National Retail Federation among them, responding, calling the riots repugnant and calling on the administration to move quickly to provide the leadership that will end this affront to our democracy. Joining us now for more is NRF President and CEO Matthew Shea. Matthew, good of you to join us. We've been collecting all of these statements and reactions from business groups like yours, from CEOs condemning what happened. Some people are asking, where was business? The election was months ago, and President Trump has contested this, has egged on these protesters and rioters. This was somewhat predictable, and business should have been more outspoken then. How do you react?
Well, Sarah, I think yesterday was a sad and embarrassing and in some ways tragic day for our country. You heard the soon-to-be Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer say, as was said about Pearl Harbor Day, it's a day that'll live in infamy. And it was a real embarrassment. It was a shock. It was something that I don't think anyone could have predicted until yesterday. And there's certainly a lot of questions to be answered with regard to how it was allowed to happen and how We weren't prepared for this after basically we saw the statements that essentially incited this kind of behavior. But up to that point, I think the focus was on